subject of the Good Governance Workshop. And right, need to turn the mic on. Thank you. I'm assuming people can hear me. I'm generally too loud. So, but anyway, I'm calling the meeting to order. And with that, we'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance. So if you please stand and join me in the pledge. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, very good. And so, Kim, we have the single item. So if you would read item number 1, please.
Could we just get a motion to adopt the agenda?
Oh, yes, I did.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
We're doing really well so far.
Yeah, I'm missing my script sheet here. So, okay, very good. Now, Kim, would you please read item 1 for us?
Item 1 comes from the Board of Supervisors participating in a discussion relative to good governance facilitated by Babs Kavanaugh, BK Consult, and provide direction to staff to make any changes or additions to the county's good governance handbook.
All right, very good. So we do have kind of a script put together relative to the items we'd like to cover today as part of our good governance workshop. And we're going to start out with a public comment period where we would allow the public to make any comments before we start the review process, the workshop, and then we'll also take public comment at the end before we adjourn. So beginning and end type of inputs. So with that, Kim, if you would please open it up to public comment at this point.
Now taking public comment on item number 1. Individuals will have 3 minutes to address the board. Public comment will be taken first from those participating in the boardroom and then from those participating through Zoom. Please be patient, you will be called upon. For those participating by Zoom, please make sure you unmute yourself when called upon. If you're joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record. There's no public comment.
All right, very good. So with that, I think I'm ready to turn it over to Babs Kavanaugh for the welcome and introductory remarks. So Babs.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Supervisor Idle. And I'm going to try and use this microphone. Is that coming through, Kim?
Seems like it's off. Is there a switch on it? That
I just,
okay.
how was that?
Doesn't seem to be.
How about this one?
That's working.
Okay, great. So eventually, if we can have this, that would be wonderful.
Right.
So thank you very much for being willing to have a meeting of this kind at this point in our current world. We really appreciate the opportunity to work with you. I think, as you know, we've been working with this board since 2017 and through several transitions, and now again, an opportunity. I know we had a workshop in January that was a Zoom workshop. This one's our first one in person, so it's really, really nice to see everybody. I really want to make sure that you all know that my partner here is Davis Campbell, and I'm going to let Davis just give a moment's introduction of his work, because I think it's a really important part of our work together.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, my work is entirely now in governance. My background is that I was executive director of the California School Boards Association for 14 years. And so I worked with elected governing officials. And we started our Masters in Governance program. And since then, I've been working with Babs and in terms of governance with school districts, but increasingly with county boards of supervisors in cities and then nonprofit, because they're the principle of governance is the same, whether you're in a county, a city, a school board, a water district. I developed the Governance Academy for the California Special Districts Association. I spent a lot of time with special districts, same issue, exactly the same issues. And so that's a little bit about me.
Thanks very much. One of the questions that I have for you, this is the first time we've done a workshop where you're sitting at the dais, and we're also making sure that we're including the public through Zoom. My request is it all right with you if I use first names?
Certainly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, great. Really helpful. Thank you. We're trying to recreate as best we can kind of the collaborative opportunity as if we were sitting across from the table. We have a few exercises that we're going to use. They'll certainly be available to the public so that they can hear this. But again, you'll have to be patient with us a little bit in terms of making sure that we can create that collaborative sense. So within that, I want to make sure if anybody has a question, the best thing to do is just, let us know, because our intention is that we're here to do some guide and teaching, but really we're here to find out what you need in terms of being effective in your work together. So it's really important, again, questions, throw them out, we'll work with them. We have a meeting that's structured till 1:30. We're going to take a break around noon. Supervisor Novell will be leaving us, but joining us again by Zoom, just to let everybody know. So we'll take a brief break there and we'll slip in a break where we need it early on in the morning. A couple of objectives for the day. The first thing that I just want to note is that you have a very well-documented governance structure. We've spent since 2017 developing a governance handbook for you that outlines your governance principles, your governance norms, and also protocols. The objective of today is to really take time to discuss and review those. Davis is going to create a context for us in terms of good governance practices, just as a reminder about roles and responsibilities, but we want to make sure that we have plenty of time to dive into your protocols. And I had a chance to talk with everybody, and this was all, one-on-one conversations. I don't bring any of that information forward, but I think the biggest thing that I noted was that we can create some more specific guidelines. The protocols are really valuable guidelines for how you work together as a governing body and a governing team. But there's some places where we could outline a couple more steps that I think will be able to support your ability to work effectively together. So that's our goal today, really interactive. The end product, again, will be to take a look at that governance handbook and dive a little deeper. We provided you with some handouts. One of them is called a discussion guide. And one of the things that I find, as having done this for years, is that it's hard for people when you see the discussion guide to say, well, are we on time? Are we following that time? So to let you know that it's designed to be really flexible. So we have some end products, that is that we want to look at the governance protocols. But again, we're going to work with whatever we need in terms of really being interactive and making sure that you get the best we can possibly offer you through this effort. So you have a discussion guide. You also have your governance handbook is there. You have a one-page summary of that governance handbook. Is kind of an overview. The other thing that we produced is that it's also in the governance handbook, but I wanted to make sure that you had in front of you the county mission, vision, core values, district priorities, and then finally your governance principles. So everything that you have in extra sheets are also in the governance handbook, but they're quick references for you. And then finally, we have a quick evaluation just to, again, think about what did you get from this and what could be more helpful. You can even jot notes as we move along for how we can help. So thank you again for participating in this. And with that, I want to just first ask any questions. Does anybody have any questions about the process? Good to go?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So the first thing is that we sent out in advance some study questions for you to just be thinking about. And again, I mentioned that we weren't going to collect the responses, but really just kind of capture your thinking as you prepare for looking throughout your system. So I'm going to use two tools as I collect notes. One is I'll type some on the computer, and there'll be times when I also will be jotting down notes on our flip chart. But for this one, I want each of you to answer the question. Give me one thing that's really unique about your county. Okay, and so I'll ask each one of you, and I'm just going to capture that one thing. And Sue, since we're going to go sequentially, I'm going to start with you. Lake Tahoe and the beauty. Okay.
Show off.
Well, not only that, but you did a nice job at just one thing. All right, Lori.
I didn't come up with anything because every time I thought of something, I went, oh, this county has it too. So nothing.
Okay, so one thing, everything. Is that, you said everything is?
I think that I think everything that I thought of that I thought was unique about our county, I could point to in another county. So or something so similar that it doesn't make us that different.
So
I think-
what's one thing?
Nothing, I have nothing, Babs.
Okay. I think I'll accept that.
Well,
Wendy,
To me, it's that our roots run deep and that we have a distinctive place in American history that's uniquely ours.
okay. And in terms of a distinct place, can you just give me like just a couple more words about what you mean by that?
We started the Western movement, and during the gold rush. I think that's really exciting.
Okay, great, thank you. John,
My number one, I'm gonna give you two here, our outdoor recreational opportunities and tourism, especially South Lake Tahoe, so echo that. But the one I think that's unique here is we have the only elected surveyor in the whole state of California.
you snuck in a few extra.
I cheated, I'm sorry.
I know, I got that. George,
Well, I think we're unique is like Wendy's family too. My family arrived here, in 1838, before the gold rush. So there was 35 families total in El Dorado County before it became a state, before the gold rush and stuff. So it's very unique. And there must have been something, a vision they saw to be able to even settle here. So I think our county is very unique. I'm very proud of our county and especially my district, especially being so diverse. I mean, very rural to also being very urban too.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of things in our county that makes us unique than other counties, I feel. And I think history is one of the biggest things.
all right, great. Thank you, George.
Yeah.
David,
Actually didn't receive this,
oh, you know what,
So-
you didn't.
You wanna-
That's right,
so you
I'm
wanna copy
sorry.
mine?
So David, what comes to mind?
Well, if, though I think much of the focus has been on kind of the larger county, I might talk a little bit more about, smaller county government, which I find to be a very inclusive and family-like environment that really supports its employees.
That's a really nice addition, thank you. Don,
As far as we know, we are the only county that our general plan, excuse me, our general plan requires a fully funded TIM fee program,
That's true.
and implications on land use make it
a fully funded,
traffic impact mitigation fee program. And
Voter initiative.
the land use implications make us very unique with that.
Mhm.
thank you. All right, so, as we work together, again, having what's unique in the back of your mind in terms of how it is we work together as a body. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bates.
Thank you. Don, this is a unique relation. I mean, I feel like I should be genuflecting or something with you.
Ooh.
But, oh. So I have to keep talking into the microphone. Does this work now? Does it work now? Does this work?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, it does.
Seems like it's
Much
working.
better.
You
Yes.
want me to use this? Actually, I won't be turning my head. I think I'll.
Okay.
One of Bab's main job is to keep me from taking us into Saturday morning in terms of time. So she will be, her job is to prod me when I am taking too much time, like I am now. So I just wanted to explain that. We've been doing this a long time, Babs and I. So I want to talk a little bit about and review what is really a basic foundation of effective governance that, as I was mentioning in my comments earlier, that affect virtually every organization, and particularly in this country, because we are a country that is almost unique in the sense that we use board governance both in our public corporations, in our public agencies, and all of our nonprofits by law. And so what I've learned is that there are basically four core foundational principles about effective governance. The first relates specifically to elected boards, elected bodies. And that is that there is a transition that has to occur, and it has to occur from campaigning to governing. because those are two distinctly different human activities, so to speak. What you learn fairly quickly is that as an individual board member, you don't have the authority to fix the problems that you campaign to fix. You just can't do it by yourself. Just doesn't work that way. And that's why governance is such a critical function. The other main point about the transition from campaigning to governing is that there are no holes barred when you're campaigning other than the election law. Almost none of that applies once you get on a board. Because being on a local board in California, whether it's a city council or a county board of supervisors or a school board or a special district, is a nonpartisan function. It's designed that way, both in state law and in the tradition and culture. It's literally to keep the sort of battles that you often get engaged in when you run for office. I have run for and won my election for a county, Yolo County Board of Education, for example. And so I personally experienced that. And even though I teach governance, I found myself fighting to not violate virtually everything that I teach, right? So I've been in that situation. So this notion of nonpartisanship is really an important part. That's part of that transition, very important part. So what about governance? There are three fundamental organizational characteristics that exist in all of these organizations that I was describing. One is the subject matter expertise. In a school district, it's curriculum and instruction. In a water district, it's quality, it's the actual production of high quality, safe water, so on and so forth. There is an administrative function, you'll be happy to know, Don. In every,
Can we automate that one? No.
there's an administrative function, and in the case of the subject matter, and in your case, it's often in, I won't say silos, but I could, but often in individual functional units or divisions within the county. So there is obviously Parks and Recreation, there is agriculture, you just go down the line, and each of those have a mindset. Like in administration, you develop an administrative mindset. You approach problems from an administrative perspective. That's where you often deal with how to solve problems. In governance, that's a totally separate function in every organization. And it is a function that has its own mindset. You have to really highly effective trustees, I've found over 35 years of dealing with this, have a governance mindset. And it's hard to describe sometimes, but it's knowing how to think about governance, recognizing that governance is in fact its own independent organ, equal to administration and subject matter. It is absolutely a critical function. One of the key things as you kind of go down this progression, transition to governing, then governance as a critical function. One of the key parts to this, if you don't have the authority as an individual to solve one of the problems that you campaigned on, the board can solve that problem. The board has all the authority as a board in public meetings through at least a majority vote, if not more than that, has the power to solve those kinds of problems. So that means the responsibility of the individual county supervisor turns to the board. Because if you can get the board to agree, if the board agrees, then that can become actionable items, whether it's policy, whether it's an approval of an administrative regulation or something that's in case, but it's only the board that can do that. So the key element distinction between non-functional boards, and I have worked with some highly non-functional boards. I have never seen a case where a board that does not have coherence and operate as a unified board has been successful. I'm going to say that straight out. And I've worked with Los Angeles Unified. I've worked with school district. I've worked with San Diego School District. I've worked with, I had quite, for 15 years, I had a European practice as well. And all those cases, I never saw a case where a board that was not unified could effectively carry out governance responsibilities. They could count votes, but counting votes is not just governance. That's an important distinction. When you come to the board table, because the problem with counting votes is that what you find yourself doing is a transactional kind of operation where you start trading things, you start worrying about, am I going to get 3 votes? Am I going to get 3 votes on this? That moves you away from the issue of unity and coherence. It's the right thing that you want to do, and you'll have differences of opinions. I want to distinguish between a unified board and a uniform board. Some people that are uncomfortable with the concept of a unified board begin to think, well, does that mean we all have to think alike? Does that mean, well, a uniform board is a lockstep. Everybody does everything the same. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a unified board, where you have individuals with very different perspectives, very different beliefs, who have to find common ground, something more important than their own individual beliefs, something that supersedes that. And that's usually in the area of strategic goals, because you need to have something you can unify around, and something that carries out the common reason why all of you are on this board. And I want to tell you, you will find that common reason, because no matter how different your political philosophies, how different your personal philosophies, your ideologies, you will find common ground when it comes to things like safety and health, and because you're all here for the right reason. You're all here because you care. Well, you were describing the strengths of why you're here in terms of El Dorado County. You're all here because this is a unique county and you have an opportunity to govern it. That is a powerful responsibility. And that's why coherence is the key. So you have to find common ground. You cannot afford to allow differences and disputes. And that's one of the things about voting that's good, is that at some point you just have to vote, right? You've reached the point where very unified boards can very often have 3-2 votes. They can have 4-1 votes. The question is, do they maintain unity afterwards? I always say that what happens after a vote, particularly a split vote, determines whether you're a unified board or not. I had a case where there was a particularly divisive vote, very difficult vote. And I believe that was a unified board. And I happened to be in the hallway after this vote, and one of the staff members came up to a board member and said, wow, wasn't that horrible what X person said? And the board member who was in the majority and who was an advocate for what passed stopped the guy and said, no, don't talk to him like that, about him like that. He is a deeply committed public servant. He is a trustee on this board. I'm not going to have you attack him out. And that's a unified board, even though they were at opposite ends of the vote. They respected each other and they believed together. I used to work in the legislature, and I'll never forget, I was deputy state superintendent of schools for a while, and I was pushing a bill with happened to be the most liberal assemblyman in the Capitol, really. And he said, I want you to go talk to X assemblyman. And I said, well, John, he's the most conservative. You guys never vote together on anything. He said, but I respect him. I respect his perspective. I want to know where he is on this, because we're actually together more than we're opposed. And you'll find that too. You will be voting together many more times than you will have those kind of major issues. So that's what a unified board looks like. And that's what you strive for. There are unifying forces, and they're usually around strategic goals. And as we go into the morning, we'll want to specifically talk about the role of your goals and the role of the board goals as to accomplish that. I just want to give recognition to the fact that you have listed good governance as one of the goals. I think that's really terrific, and you have an action plan for that. And I think that's really great.
Before I'm going to interrupt you for just a second and just ask everybody if the document that has El Dorado County, it has the vision, mission, core values, and then the El Dorado strategic goals. And what Davis is referring to is goal number 2. And so I support what Davis is saying.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is, that's huge that you have that. But as we're going to talk about it, is it just on paper? One of the things that we'll be talking about this morning is what's on paper and what's in action, what actually happens. That's the key with all of what we're going to talk about. So one thing I do want to mention is I talked about governance mindset. And some people say, well, how do you define governance? So let me define it in the context of the governance mindset. There are 4 characteristics that make up the governance mindset. And this has been tested all throughout the state in all different levels of government and all of that. And the first thing is that governance is a system job. So you have to be system thinkers. The person that is on the staff that has to be a system thinker, and is, by the way, I think is great, is Don and David. They also have to be system thinkers. They have to look at all the pieces and the moving parts of the organization of the county at any given time. Well, so do you. In many ways, county governance, as others, is a zero-sum game. What you know that the audience and what our audience in the Zoom may not always know or understand is what that means is if you make a decision on X, it's going to have, by definition, an impact somewhere else down the line in the county. You don't get to, you can't just make a decision, as you know, and you see that, of course, in the budget as well as elsewhere. And by the way, do you know what in my opinion, the most significant policy document is in the county? Budget. Because where you put the dollars reflects what your real priorities are. And anyway, so this whole notion of system thinking and is so critical because it's unique to governance. You don't really expect the county sheriff, I know they're independent, but independently elected, but I just grabbed that out of the air because anyway. You don't expect the county sheriff's always to be a system thinker about everything else, parks and rec. You've got to be able to deal with agriculture, parks and rec, child protective services, adult protective services, just go down the line. Only Don and David have to do that. These are moving parts. Governance is a strategic job. Your focus and the mindset has to be on strategy, has to be on, this is where policy, people will often say boards are policy boards. Be careful about that because you have other responsibilities that may or may not be policy. But all of your issues have to be looked at from a strategic perspective. So when someone makes a proposal or you make a proposal or whatever for a specific thing, you have to ask the question, what is the impact of our decision on obtaining our strategic goals? Is it going to divert us from it? Is it going to lessen? Because remember, system-wide, you make a decision here, it's going to impact over here, and you may not be aware of it. And so what is the impact on, that is what strategic thinking is. And governance is a strategic job. Anytime you get into administration, you're in the administrative mindset part. You can't possibly get involved in that. You can't know all of that. And that's why you stay focused on the power of the board is in its strategic thinking and its system focus, or strategic focus and system thinking. The third characteristic is you have to all be deep learners. You must learn the issues around the major, in this case, strategic goals. If you narrow down to a particular strategic goal to an actionable item, which I will highly recommend, something that you can stay focused on within that broad goal, your job really is to understand the issues. And you know better than I, the best way to deal with issues in the community at the grocery store, right? Or the self-serve gasoline, when they walk up to you and say, why in the heck, and they don't say it nicely. You need to know all the facts about it. You need to be able, not on every little thing that happens, but rather on the big issues. If you can connect that to, and then you can sell the county. You have a responsibility to the community to also not just represent the community, but inform the community. So if you have approved something, you have and the only way you can do that is through deep learning. And I mean really understanding. I had a case, one of a CEO, I was talking with this about, it happened to be in South Carolina, a CEO, and I was having this conversation and I listed these characteristics and he said, you just described the best council member we have. This person is always strategic. I can talk to her because she understands systems, she understands strategy, she's very strategic, and she reads everything. She is as knowledgeable about the big issues, not all the operational stuff. You don't need to be knowledgeable about that. You need to be knowledgeable on the big issues and how they affect your community and that kind of thing at that level. And finally, my favorite, managing your public manner. I know that this is probably not a problem here, but you have to watch it all the time. And that is particularly under stress, like you've been, whether it's the pandemic or other issues. The public deserves to have you have your best, not to have you, let's see how I can say this over Zoom, not to have you unnecessarily upset over something that some other trustee says. I mean, I have seen situations where, as I go into highly dysfunctional environments, where the problem is the board members just don't like each other. They've been there and they've gotten angry over they have too much history, too much memory of the issues that came up. And so when that happens, it affects the quality of your substantive system and strategy decisions. Because the person making, you can never make a decision based on the person that's making the motion. And people do that sometimes. They'll say, you know what, I just really, I know this person, I don't trust what he's saying or she's saying, I don't really think that's what it's about. You go down that road and you find yourself in trouble very quickly. And it changes the culture and environment So, and you may remember from the last time I did a little pie chart, my very favorite pie chart in the whole world. It says what constitutes what you get from a conversation. 58% comes from body language. 30-something% comes from tone of voice. 7% comes from words. Well, that really affects you if you're sitting at this, on this dais, or if you're sitting at this table, because you only use words, right? Except no, you're really communicating through your manner. And so we call this managing your public manner. Now, if you don't understand that concept, you have never been married. Think about it. Body language, tone, words about 7%. That's about right, right? And well, the problem is here, or the issue here is you're dealing with substantive issues that affect the entire community, the entire county. And so it's something to be conscious about. And the best way to deal with it is through you by the peers. You have a responsibility to be accountable for your own collective as well as individual behavior. So if you see something beginning to happen, it doesn't have anything to do with substance, but has to do with the manner in which, particularly in dealing with staff. I have seen cases of just abysmal language from a trustee or a board member in their communication with staff. And I always will say to them, you do understand that you go home and the staff stays here and talks in the hallway. Now, I want to tell you, if you don't think you're getting enough access now, try it after you've insulted the staff so many times that they don't even want to see you coming, much less hear your question. Just from a self-interest point of view, it makes no sense whatsoever. But it also doesn't make sense from a civic behavior point of view. Public officials need to act civilly with the public as well as with each other. So those are the four particular sections, pieces of governance.
And now I'm going to take it away from you
Yeah.
for just a minute.
You can take it, yeah.
Well, I'm going to take it, but I think that what's really important, I'm going to take you back to the summary sheet you have. And this summary sheet you have is the summary of your governance handbook. And so since 2017, and I believe we've had turnover of several supervisors. So we've brought in new supervisors through the time that we've worked together. But in that, and I'm going to hand it back to Davis in just a minute. But on this chart, basically, it talks about those four characteristics of a governance mindset. It talks about the effective board. And Davis has really hit on that around cohesion, not uniform, but unified. And then it talks about the responsibilities. And I'm going to ask him to just touch briefly on governance responsibilities and governance principles. But, I'm going to stand back for just a sec to say one thing, which is that Davis and I have worked together for years. I was hired in 1999 to be a staff member at California School Boards Association out of my community. And I had a chance to work with Davis and through the development of the Masters in Governance. And I still sit here and learn new things. So, I want to thank you for that and just say that, he studies this, he learns, he communicates that. But with that, I wanted to just talk about the 5 responsibilities just as an overview, because he's touched on them. Then talk about your governance principles just for a minute. Okay, just to say these were developed by the governing board in 2017 that held true because we brought them back in January to have the new board take a look at them and say, do these still resonate with us? And then I'm going to ask you, the second study question was, what are the strengths of this board? So I'm going to ask Davis to set that context for us, and then I'm going to get you to give me some answers. I'm talking about the governance responsibilities, and I'm talking about the governance principles, the 5 responsibilities, and then the governance principles. I just wanted to highlight.
Okay. So within the context of the system thinking and strategic focus, there are universal responsibilities of governing boards. And this is true, again, across the basis. The first is And it'll feel comfortable to you, I think. The first is that you set direction for the county. And that's exactly what it is, plain spoken. You set the direction. You better be unified. Because if you want the staff, what the staff cannot handle, something as fundamental as the direction of this county, which you reflect in the strategic goals, which you adopt with the staff. What they can't handle and why it becomes dysfunctional is when the board keeps changing the direction. When the board sends mixed signals because you've set the direction through adopting the strategic plan, you have to stay true to it. You have to stay true to what you've adopted as you go through it. Otherwise, people begin to just, is this a 3-2 board? The problem with 3-2 boards is that it shifts. The swing vote, being very practical, the swing vote can change the direction of the agency. With one vote, you cannot be effective that way. It is impossible. It only causes serious difficulties. And a lot of that is because of egos, I have to say. A lot of that is the egos of trustees who get so tied up in their own positions, to be totally candid, that that they have a hard time using that word, the C word, compromise, and collaborate. So the setting direction is a reflection of your ability to be a unified board to give consistent and stable direction to the county. The second is that you, as you know, most of what you do meeting to meeting is about maintaining and sustaining the structure of the county. And that's what we use that word to mean. That's a little vague. And what it means is that you adopt the budget, you have ongoing approval responsibilities over plans, and it's all structural. You hire and fire the county administrative officer. Those are all
That chance.
structural, and those are your meeting to meeting responsibilities. They have those responsibilities, in order to provide stable direction, have to be grounded in this clear, focused, uniform board that is consistent with its direction, and you reflect that in your meeting to meeting work. In other words, if you've been serious about setting direction for the county, your meeting to meeting work must support that decision. Remember, all you're doing is supporting your own decision, and that's what is so important. The third area is providing support to the county. I think that by this, I mean two things. One is that you hire the CEO of the county, the CAO. The CAO hires, and I know you have other responsibilities as a county in personnel areas, and differs county to county in terms of department heads and that kind of thing. But the point is that these folks work for you. I've actually had, there's a statement. There are two statements that are sometimes made, and they're never made by a unified board, but sometimes made. One, I do not want to be a rubber stamp board. And two, I don't want to be in the staff's pocket. That's a cancer. It doesn't make sense. So you give direction to the staff does what you ask it to do, what they've asked you to do. But when it comes time with the reports and it comes time and stuff, if you ever make a decision based on, I don't want a rubber stamp, you're going like, wait a minute, these are our staff. They're doing what we asked them to do. You're not rubber stamping. You're going to the next phase, which is an accountability, which I'll talk about in a minute, is an accountability phase. So watch out for those. Those kind of things are really divisive. So you provide support for the county because they're your employees. You hire the CEO. I have to tell you, I got a kick out of it. When I walked out the door there, I saw where the human resources, I saw human resources risk.
Mhm.
I have to tell you, Don, every staff member knows that human resources is a risk. But anyway, that's a side point. Supporting the staff and is very much a part of governance and leadership. And also really affects the culture. You would be amazed, or maybe not, how much of a negative impact and a board that is not unified, that is divisive and all that, the impact that flows down through the organization is, you'd be, I mean, it's amazing what kind of, you never want to have that kind of negative impact. The second thing is that I think you support the county by supporting the programs that you approve. Sounds weird to say it that way, but you may have been on the losing boat on a, and I should have mentioned it, but unified vote. I had a question, can you, is a 3-2 vote mean that you're not unified? No, it doesn't mean you're not unified. Votes are very elusive. I mean, votes represent, they're sort of like polls. They represent how you're thinking at the time and the information. There's a lot that goes into how you vote. Should not misread that and to suggest that the only time that that's an indicator of the problem is when it's always 3-2. Then you've got blocks. That is not a unified board. But if you find you're on the losing end or winning end, and it kind of goes back and forth depending on your own personal how you feel about, that's what. And so I always say yes, no. You can absolutely be unified board. I mean, that doesn't have anything to do with being a unified board. So the supporting the program is the programs that you approve, both in the county and complementing when you, and I know you do this, I'm not saying something that you don't do, which is to be very supportive when things go well and you feel like that. That's how you support the county, by being supportive. The next one is ensuring accountability. Huge responsibility, can really pull a board apart. It's something to watch out for because it is absolutely, you need to have systems of accountability. And talking with Don and how the county, I have no knowledge of how that's set up here, and so I don't want to, but you need to have a productive accountability, not punitive accountability. There's a big difference. Productive accountability is if something's not working, you work with the staff and with the CAO to find out how to make it better at the, remember, strategic level and system level. Don's responsible for the operational level. And so, but he's going to talk with you about if there's a problem and you deal with it. That's accountability. And then of course, CAO evaluation is obviously an accountability mechanism for the board, a responsibility of the board. And then finally, the one that I think is something that resonates with all of you is developing community leadership. Now, I talk about community leadership, not necessarily just community information, because leadership means if you've got a program, you're a deep learner, you understand the county programs, you need to sell them if you believe in them, if you approve them, if you feel really great that this is one of your priorities. Knowing those priorities and being able to articulate it is a powerful way of supporting the county, so that in your forums and your town halls and your supervisorial district interactions, being upbeat about the programs, if you feel upbeat. I mean, this is one of those things where if you're not supportive, you need to bring that to, you need to put that on the table. I mean, you need to say, I really don't support this. Because you need to be able to go out and have the confidence of saying, we've got these great programs. El Dorado County is great. It's doing well. We've got programs that you should know about, not just things that are annoying, a constituent or somebody that, I mean, you have a responsibility to respond to constituents, and there are mechanisms for how you do that, deal with complaints. But it's that dual responsibility. You represent the supervisorial district, but you educate the supervisorial district. Does that make sense? You want the supervisorial district to understand the really good things that are going on in the county. So they have a perspective. So I'll give it back to that.
Thank you. Any questions for Davis? Okay, good. So here's where I'd like to take us next. We're gonna move into more interactive, really engaging you in the rest of this discussion. And I really appreciate, thank you, Davis, for creating the context for us. So the first question I'm gonna ask you is, if you had to give me one strength of the board, what would you say? You know, if you said of this governing board, and I'm just gonna ask supervisors, I'm not gonna engage Don in this question, just because. So with that, Wendy, if you could give me just one strength of this board, tell me what it is.
Each of us is deeply committed to our community and our county.
Okay, great, thank you. John?
The diversity of education experiences that we've had in El Dorado County.
Great.
The diversity.
Diversity of experience and background.
Right.
Okay, great. George?
I think the biggest thing is listening to the constituents and their problems, and especially with people's issues and stuff, and solving those issues. I think this board is very strong on doing that.
Thank you. Sue?
I'd say it's a commitment to strategic plan. I'm impressed by everyone's conversation when you stay focused.
Yes. Thank you. Lori?
Our passion.
Great. Thank you. Well, I'm not surprised, having had the opportunity to work with you, that you would identify these as the major strengths. So let's take a look for a minute at the document that outlines the principles that you have identified as the principles by which you govern. And it's in your handbook. That's one place to access it. If public wants to access it online, there's also a document that looks like this that has your strategic goals and the district mission and vision. And on the back page are the governance principles. And I'd like you to have a look at these, and I'm going to swing around again and ask you to tell me, they're all important. You spent time really thinking about, again, what are the principles by which you govern, which really goes back to what Davis was talking about governance mindset, because this is the lens by which you make decisions, by which you govern together. So if you had to say currently, remember we've been through kind of some very unusual circumstances over the last 18 months. And, so thinking about it and saying, is there one that you really want to highlight, just to remind yourselves of these are the principles by which we govern? Which one would it be? So looking at these principles, knowing that they're all important, that you've reviewed them, you've identified them, you've readopted them. Is there one in particular kind of that highlights this? Highlights how it is that you govern? Who's ready?
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
To me, it's number one. I mean, that's where it starts. It's strategic focus and mission driven, because I think the rest of them, are supporting documents or supporting statements, principles associated with that top one.
Okay, thanks, John. And I just want to remind everybody that you can vote on the same one.
I was going to say that too, because it talks about, first of all, governing as a team. So that talks about our interactions with each other and how we are effective. It talks about the fact that we need to be strategically focused and mission driven, which is, as what Sue said, adhering to our strategic goals and driving the mission of our organization in the county. So if we have that, that sets the tone for everything else that we are about.
Good. Thank you. Who's next?
I think number 4, I think we're still working on this. It's
Mhm.
kind of a work in progress for us. So I think at this point in time, this is really important because you know, I think that common purpose is incredibly important, and I'm not sure we're quite there yet. So I think that's something that we really need to work on in the short term.
Okay, good. Thank you, Sue. George?
I think 1 and 3. I can't make a decision on both, but I think both of those are very, very critical to me.
Well, so talk about number 3 a little bit.
Well, I think it just being accountable for the highest standards of the Board of Performance and Effectiveness is being respectful. And I'm sorry, Lori, because there's been, I mean, not Lori, but Wendy, there's been times that, you know, I've stepped a little bit out of my own district into her district. And the reason why, because a lot of these people that, I know so many people, I think that's a lot of the problem. Because a lot of people know me, and there's a lot of people that don't know what district they're in. They really don't. So they're reaching out to me, being that I'm helping, but it's actually in Wendy's district. And I think I overstepped a little bit of the boundaries on that. So I gotta tell you that. I'm sorry. Okay.
Well, there's no need to apologize. I appreciate that. And I think that's just part of our learning
Right.
curve
It's a learning curve.
with
is
each
what it
other.
is.
And I certainly recognize that your business is in the heart of my district too. And so of
Right.
course, you know, people. And so I think this workshop is also really good about us all gaining an understanding about, you know, how do we want to handle those situations?
right.
And, you know, like if constituents ask to meet us in other supervisorial, that's a hard word, supervisorial districts,
Yes.
you know, what is our protocol for that? Do we inform, and I'm getting into the weeds here, I don't want to do that, but do we, you know, talk to the district supervisor first and all those protocols,
Right.
which I look forward to
Right.
getting into later, but, you know, just appreciate that, George, and we're all learning together.
Yeah.
So,
And it is a big learning curve for me. I mean, this is new to me. I'm always the type of person that, you know, been in my business for 47 years, and I'm a problem solver. So I want to solve everybody's problem, not just people that come to me, but I want to solve everybody. And that's the way I've always been. So I think it's hard for me to adjust to that, but I'm working on it.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, George and Wendy. That was a really good discussion. So Lori,
I can't pick one. I just, I keep going back and forth and they're all very important.
good. Well, that's a really nice summary closure to this discussion, is to say that's the purpose of these, right? And what I wanted to see was kind of what you were highlighting. It follows the conversation in the study guide, that the advanced study questions, one of the questions that I asked you, and I'm going to see if you're willing to share this. So is there something that you could do to increase your effectiveness? We asked you what was unique about the county, and then asked you the strengths of the board. And then the next question was, is there one thing that you can think of? And I'm okay with passing if that ends up being the choice. But if there's something that you think of that really could increase your effectiveness, I think it would be helpful for us to hear what that is right now. Who might be willing and ready to give us one thing that you think could increase your effectiveness? Sue, are you ready?
Sure. State politics out of county government.
Okay,
That's been a conversation.
okay. So again, just thinking about nonpartisan position.
Right, and David still said it very succinctly, you know, this is a nonpartisan, talking about county.
Right.
government. And I'd like to make sure we try to continue to focus on it.
Thank you. And I know I'm asking, it's a little risk taking here. So, you know, I'm mindful of, you know, just being careful about this. And again, the respectfulness that you share among yourselves. So Lori, did something come to your mind for increasing effectiveness that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, but I'm not sure that I was thinking the right thing when I read it. The way I read it might be different. And I think we'll probably talk about it more in the protocols, but well, that's actually it. We have these protocols and honestly, I don't think we're following them very well. And I think it's difficult, honestly. This is my 3rd year on the board. It's in a handbook, and then I don't get a reminder until we kind of go astray. How often do I need to read these? I don't know.
Good point.
So, Yeah.
That is a really good point. And again, part of what we bring when we bring a governance workshop is kind of to revisit it. Because it's one thing to read it. It's another to say, okay, well, how do we translate this? How do we make sure that that we're actually honoring what we said, right? So really well stated. Sue? Sue, I'm sorry. I was looking at Wendy.
No problem.
Apologies. Wendy.
I think we've all been at an extreme disadvantage as January rolled around, is that, the only time we were together was June. So, we missed those early months of being together and even seeing each other in the hallways and getting to know each other on a personal level. And I think that's been really challenging for this board. I think we've actually worked through it pretty well. Like you said, we're not quite there yet, but we're so much better than when we were in January. I'm really encouraged about that. So I think going forward, I would like to continue that process and get to know each of my fellow board members, better within the guidance of the Brown Act. And I would like a deeper understanding of the 2 or 3 issues that are most important to each one of you. And I think that will help intentionally build trust and collaboration between us. And I'd just like to keep that in the back of my mind as we are looking for common ground in our decisions, knowing what really is important to each of you. So I think that would continue to strengthen us as a board.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Wendy. John, how about you?
Better inter-office communications between staff members to help keep the clerk of the board, personnel, supervisors, assistants, and the board of supervisors informed. And I'm not talking about Brown Act violation. I'm just talking about following what I think are protocols for things like meeting invitations. You've been invited to a meeting. Are you going to be able to attend or not? And just responding with the tools we have so that you understand who is going to be present and who isn't. And we've had some difficulties at times in terms of having to reach out and talk to board members to say, well, you're going to be there or not. And so it's a commitment level. I think when you use the tool and you commit to be there, then people know there's an expectation. There's always things that can go awry, right?
Sure.
But I think just a better level of communication, not to say that there isn't good communication, but I think we can do better in that regard so that everybody is kind of on the same page. No surprises. And again, I'm going to underscore the Brown Act has to be complied with.
Sure.
But even to the level of communicating with the CAO's office and staff about objectives or things you like to see changed and stuff, the board can be given some advisory that describes, okay, there's an interest in doing this. Fine, into discussion, no surprises. That's kind of what it comes down to, right? It's just better communication, which I think is, 80% of the world's problems is communication. So that's where I came up with.
Okay, good. Thank you. Well stated. George.
Well, I think the biggest thing is respecting other boards, other supervisors of authority and some of their, interactions and stuff with their constituents. And like Lori and I were just talking about recently. And I think, and clarifying the board's roles, what is the roles of the board of supervisors and what they can bring to the table better. And like John said, communication and the Browns Act is frustrating. It really is, especially when you're an alternate on some of these commissions and committees. And, you don't know if you're going to be there or can be there or can't be there, or you're not supposed to be there. That's frustrating to me because I don't know if the 2 people that are on that particular commission are going to be there or not. And I think that's where it comes back to it, like John was talking about, where somebody can intervene with me a little bit more, saying that I'm going to be there. You don't have to be there. And I think that's where it's very frustrating because we don't want to be caught in a Browns Act.
Right.
So that's what's frustrating a little bit to me.
Maybe we did add that to our protocol. That's a good
There you
idea.
go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Good. Remember where we're going to put that, Wendy.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So the next thing I'd like to do, and I'm going to tell you what the exercise is, but I'm going to suggest that we maybe take a 5-minute break. If everybody would like to do that, just to stand up, walk around, get a little water. So the next exercise I want to do is around community perception. And the way that it's going to work is that I'm going to ask you how you want to be perceived by the community. And I'm going to ask you each to offer one suggestion. And if somebody gives the one you had, you can say ditto, but, and I need one from each of you. Then I'm going to ask you to rank how you believe that the community perceives you. Right? This is how you want to be perceived. This is what you think the community perceives you. And I'll walk through these steps because I know it sounds. This is for the board as a whole. So Don
Board as a
and
whole.
David
Ah.
chooses
Okay,
if you would like to participate or not. We'll talk about that. But so there's going to be 3 steps. How do you want to be perceived by the community? How do you think the community perceives you on a scale of 1 to 5, right? 1 being not very effective against your criteria, 5 being highly effective. And then finally, one thing you could do to move the needle a point. Okay, so it's a really interesting exercise. What it does is it starts to look at kind of an action plan to make sure that you're aligned with how you want to be perceived by the community, how you think you are, and how you could get closer to them. So it's a fun exercise. And it's just fun. Okay, we're talking, so David suggested that I make sure this is how the board wants to be perceived by the community, not you individually. So it's really an important distinction. So thank you for that. So we'll do that exercise, and then after we do it, we'll then move right into protocols. Okay. So again, those are the 3 steps. I'm going to say come back at 10:45. So we have about 6 minutes to just take a brief break and then come back. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Is this working okay?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the first thing. We're going to be developing criteria, if you will. So it's how do you want to be perceived by the community? I'm going to capture, I may be doing shorthand, so to capture what you're telling me, or if you give me just a couple of words, that's great. And we'll just go around the room, give me one thing, and then if there's anything missing, I'll swing back again. So who wants to start? How do you want to be perceived by the community? John,
Problem solvers.
problem solvers, okay. Yes.
Oh, where's the
What's going to
camera?
be helpful?
Where's the camera?
Okay, so we will then speak again what they are. What, do you want me to do something different?
No, I just wanted to.
Okay, okay. So problem solvers from John. Who's next? Sue. Highly efficient,
Strategic.
strategic. Actually, just keep throwing them at me. That's great.
What was the question again?
The question is, how do you, as a board, as a governing body, want to be perceived by the community? If they're out in the world, out at the grocery store and they're saying, you know, this is what I think about our board of supervisors. They are
So
highly efficient.
is this how we think the community wants to see us, or how we think? Do you know there's a difference?
Yes. So I want you to be thinking from your perspective. If you heard and overheard a conversation in the community talking about this board, what would you want them to be saying about this governing body?
Okay.
Okay, so problem solvers, highly efficient, strategic, what else? Collaborative. What else?
I think basically is doing people's business by their consent.
Okay, the board is consensuous. Is that
Right,
what you're
yeah.
saying? Doing business
Responsive to the community. Is that
by
Responsive?
consent.
Yeah. Right.
Responsive to community. Good.
And this is where I'm having a hard time, because in my mind, the community wants us to be their voice in local government, but
Okay,
those words to me I don't know.
responsive to community, and also in addition to be their voice, right? Because that's what you've been
Right.
elected to do.
Right,
Exactly.
Okay.
okay. Which is hard because they're not united either.
Right.
Actually, and never will be.
Fiscally
And
responsible.
Never will be.
Yeah.
Fiscally responsible.
Mind the money. Don't commit to money
Fiscally-
you don't have. Don't go borrow money to. do programs.
Responsible.
Yes.
Good.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's good.
Now, is there anything missing on here that you don't think that you think needs to be added?
They're going to want us to be competent and knowledgeable.
Competent and knowledgeable.
I'm gonna say proactive versus bureaucratic.
Ooh,
Get things done. Don't just tell me I gotta go talk to somebody else, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say effective with that.
Yeah.
Kind of goes with that too, yeah.
I think I misspelled that
Informative
word,
should be
but
too.
mhm.
highly efficient, effective,
Yeah, that's kind of where it's going.
Yeah,
informative.
Mm-hmm.
And here, I'll get another color so I can do it sideways. I'm gonna try and make it stay on one page.
oh, then we're done.
We were asking Don, right? What did we miss?
Yeah, Don, what did you do? You got interrupted, I think.
I would add inclusive.
That's a
Inclusive,
good one.
good.
I'm gonna add transparent,
Yeah.
because I think that's one of the big ones for most people, right?
And we could make a lot of connections, like
Yep.
transparent, fiscally responsible.
Yep.
No, okay,
And I don't know how to say this, that I think people want us to meet the demands of the day while also ensuring a stable future. We need to be forward thinking, but also meet the moment. Yeah,
Forward thinking
but we need to meet the moment too.
and meet the moment.
Thoughtful's good.
There's no room.
Wow.
Thoughtful. Okay,
But I think we should include David as another opinion.
Yes.
Can we include David on this?
David.
Need to be legal.
Perception.
I'm going to decline to participate.
Okay.
So David, what did you offer?
He said he declined to offer.
Declined, okay. So looking at this and saying, you want to be problem solvers, you want to be strategic, you want to be collaborative, fiscally responsible, to be the voice of the community. Informative, inclusive, transparent, forward thinking, but meet the moment. I mean, those are, we've talked about responsibilities and roles, and these all fit into that. Now, I'm going to ask you for a really challenging thing to do, and some of you won't be able to do this. So no, it's hard, which is that I want you to kind of blur all of this criteria and think about, you're out in the community, how would the community rank you against this criteria? Right, and what you may say is, it's hard to do this overall, so I'm going to give us a 2.5, and this is where I think we could improve. So understand that you may say that we could be more collaborative, we could be fiscally responsible, whatever it is that you decide, because what we're doing is we're saying, okay, if you ranked yourselves on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not effective in this overall criteria, 5 being highly effective, and you can be a 5. So you could be that. But then what's one thing that you could do to improve how the community perceives you as a board, right? Is there one thing you could do? So at first I want you to rank, and then secondly, and we'll capture the rank, and then I just want to hear a strategy, something that you think that you as a body could do out in the community to improve community perception.
Do out in the community or with each other?
Either one.
Okay, but that's
Okay,
two different
it could be-
things.
It can be either one.
Okay.
And because part of this is, again, this is how you want the community to see you as a body, right? As a governing
It's a
body.
perspective issue. What's the perspective of the community relative?
So there could be something internally that you could say, we could adhere to our protocols always, something like that. I mean, and I know, Laura, you've talked a little bit about, we don't use them as well. We've spent time articulating them, we've agreed to them, and yet we're not using them as well as we could. Right? So it could be just that. Okay, so again, write down your ranking. And David, are you game or are you going to decline on this one? Okay.
He's thinking.
Perfect. Thinking is good. Thinking is good. All right, so David's is going to hang this up.
Yeah, this is my main goal.
We get to see if he's good at it. Okay, so remember your ranking, and then you're gonna say one strategy, one thing you could do to improve that ranking. Okay. And really what this, this is partially designed to be kind of a reflective exercise, but also a community engagement action plan. What's coming out of it that you could do to continue to strengthen your effectiveness as a governing body, so that you could continue to get high marks around the criteria that you set. So who's ready to be? John, ranking.
I'm gonna give us a ranking of 3.
Okay.
And I think the potential is to dispel social media fake news with facts. That's the biggest thing I struggle with, is people create things that aren't true. And then they try to convince other people they are. And there's any number of people that jump on that bandwagon without really understanding what's behind it.
Can I jump on this and say I would give a 3, and I would do exactly the same thing, but I would say we need to hire a board PIO that takes care of this, just so it's similar to what the sheriff does. Is we've got somebody out there personally that works for us, that can do that for us, because we don't have the time to do that. I spend, half of my time chasing my tail, trying to keep up with these fake news, and it's time. I think it's time we get
Interesting.
help.
Good. Who's next?
Lori,
Lori.
along the same lines, but I see it a little bit different, also 3.
Okay.
I've often asked, I was at a social function last night, and I'm always asking for, could you put a web page together to explain this? And then I can point people there, and then it's like, here you go, here it is. And it's along the same lines, but it's, instead of arguing with Facebook, because you're never going to win,
No.
create your own news, create your own story.
Yep.
And then you can share it, and it is what it is.
So Lori, if I were to put the strategy, right,
Mhm.
is that, I'm hearing create fact sheets. Is that what you're saying?
Perhaps that would be a good way to put it. I've always liked the phrase create your own story, but fact sheets go well.
Okay.
As a board or individually?
As a county.
As a county.
I mean,
okay.
and I know there's some departments that are trying to do this for certain issues. We've asked, we've talked about it, but the longer we don't get those little explaining processes would be lovely. This is the process for this, so when somebody says something, you go, that's not quite right. I can just point to it and say, here's the
Right.
process.
Right.
Because I tried doing that in my newsletters myself, and it's very time consuming.
yeah.
And it takes a lot of resources and research to make sure I'm accurate. I always want accurate information. So
Yeah.
if as a county and departments, we can explain these things so that we can point
Great.
the public to it, I just think it would help so much.
And explain them simply.
Yeah.
Very, very.
Yeah,
simply.
no, yeah, it
Yeah.
can't be wonky. It has to be layman's terms.
Or
which-
government speak.
Yeah, no government speak,
Right.
exactly.
Okay.
Which a top level process map can do that exactly. It's graphical. It explains step by step what happens, it describes ins and outs. And if you keep it simple, pretty easy for most people to understand. Here's the sequence of events we go through, and here's where the decision comes out.
Right.
But we do not have in this county a lot of process maps that get to that kind of overview level. So I think that's an opportunity. It's some
Well,
work.
and because the other reason to have that out there is sometimes processes could be improved, and the public could weigh in and help guide that if they actually saw the process itself first. And then, it's hard to fix something if you don't know what's broke about it, other than you just don't like it.
Right.
So.
Good. George?
Question, is this first read for the whole board or is it just for individuals?
It's for the whole board.
Oh, for the whole board? I think a 3 is. And I think the biggest thing is, like John was talking about, is social media, because you got to be real careful what you say and what you do. And my social media stuff, I don't even post anything except for my race car or something like that, but I don't talk about any politics, because you got to be really leery of, being beat up by people and how they perceive you. So best thing, I just stay out of it. It's better just to leave it alone when it comes to that. But I think our thing with our newsletter, I think is very good. I think a lot of the board members here, their newsletter is very informative and it helps a lot, and Mark's done a real good job by doing that. And Lori and Wendy, and I think you have one, don't you, Sue? Sue, everybody has one. Yeah. So I think that's a great thing. And I think it needs to be put out there more, so people know that we have a newsletter. I don't think it's informative enough. And people don't know where to go, but I think the county needs to be able, what's that?
I got 1,200 followers. now.
Lori has a ton.
Yeah, well, I've got a ton too now. It just seems like, especially my Facebook page has gone ballistic. So anyway, so I think that's a lot of it right there. So.
Okay.
I do not have a newsletter, but I hold monthly public meetings.
Mark will help you. Just kidding you.
But I want the interaction. I'm looking at back and forth, right? How do you get information from the public? What's concerning them?
Yeah.
How do we find out what our latest crime statistics are? A regular dialogue is the approach I've taken, as opposed to a newsletter, which is more pushing information out. You can get questions back, but you don't get the interaction with that. So, but I have a small district. It makes it much easier for me to do that.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
And-
'cause I was
and-
just-
It was a very rural
It's
district.
true.
But there's no one solution for any given
Drive an hour to-
supervisorial
Oh,
district, but
no.
it's what works for you. I think it's what it
Right.
comes down to. So,
Well, right, and
No,
your strategy was this piece right here. So whatever you use to make sure that you can do that. That's the tool you use. So
Right.
that's great.
Yep.
David. You gonna pass? Don, how about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna be the rebel here. And I'm putting this in the context of this last 18 months is something governing boards and county administrators, county councils have never done, communities have never dealt with. And in the context of comparing to how we've handled it compared to other public jurisdictions, I would say we're a 4.
Okay.
I would say from a community perspective, we're lower than that. We're around a 3. But I think we have to be careful in comparing government to private sector businesses because we operate with a different set of rules. The strategy is to try to be more proactive. And I think that fits with everything that's been talked about, getting accurate information out there and finding ways to correct the false statements and things and becoming more proactive in that regard.
Great. Really interesting.
I
that
still need to weigh in. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
Not so good.
Yeah, and I took a different turn on this. I'd say we're about a 2.5 just because of time. I think we haven't had, because we had such a rocky start with COVID and we just haven't had the time, I think, to really solidify all of our aspirational goals that I think everyone articulated. It has nothing to do with who we are individually. It's just a function of how we started. And what came to me is that I think how we get to those aspirational goals is to recognize and to really understand, as Davis talked about this morning, that our authority is to operate as a whole. Coming into this morning, it occurred to me that it is so easy as electeds, as community leaders, to be all wrapped up and concerned about our personal stance, goals, position. And I don't know about you, but I continually have to fight within myself of the need to prove that I'm worthy of this seat, that I'm worthy of this office. And when I let that ego come into play, that causes me to make different decisions. And so I keep getting back to the fact that I have no authority in my own right, but our authority is as a board. And as we can continue to strengthen that, support each other, respect each other, but collaborate as a whole, then we're going to get to those aspirational goals. We're going to be a 5. I have no doubt.
So if you were to give me a couple of bullets on the strategy itself, it sounds like
it's about intentionally operating as a whole, because it's not about proving ourselves individually, it's about advancing our county.
Davis, did you want to add something?
I was just going to, that's a great point, Wendy, and I was just going to add that one of the things that helps with that authority of the board is to own the positive actions of the board. So you own that because you're the board, right? And so as the board operates effectively, which it only can in a unified way, you need to own that as an accomplishment. And our board has done this and our board has done that. And I think that helps a little bit with this balance of an individual authority versus, no, you're there to get to make changes and improvements and support positive things. And you get credit for that. I mean, you own that. You did that as one of the 5 members of the board.
Thank you, Davis. And I think that's really important. And it's just, again, kind of stepping back, and you use the word intentional. And so, I mean, I think even in the last 6 months, I've seen some intentional changes that have happened around some of your design planning strategies around what communities are going to look like. I mean, really a positive commitment that came out of kind of a challenging time. So again, I think I really support what Davis is saying, which is, not only intentionally, but also remembering to kind of take a minute and say, we did this, we actually made some progress here. Let's note that and celebrate. Does
So
that
actually,
communicate that?
what you're saying is, so if a congressman calls you a rock star, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
They just feel like asking
You don't want to answer that one.
we're gonna dodge it.
Okay, all right.
So thank you for that. And what's really interesting to me is that what came up, and again, I'm sure that it reflects sort of our current circumstances with COVID and Zoom and kind of the challenges that we've all had. This is all around communication. You know, communication and really wanting to make sure that, again, the communication is factual and that it describes processes and that that you have those tools, that you have ways to continue to do your community leadership in the community through newsletters and community meetings, et cetera. So nicely done. I like, there's a good range here, pretty solid, and then a little balance here. So now here's the time that I really want to take, and I know we have Sue here on board for the next hour, though you're going to join us, I know, by Zoom. But let's look at the protocols, because the protocols you have are good protocols, but I think that we can look at them and see if there's some places where you can strengthen them. Yeah, that's fine. So that oversheet lists all the protocols. And we have the handbook to look at, and Don and I in the past have worked together to make any adjustments and changes based on, you know, what you're suggesting, and of course working with David to make sure that we're compliant and they're legal, et cetera. So, you know, what we're going to try and capture here are there's some things that could be of value that could strengthen and clarify some of the specific protocols. And my thinking is that using meetings as strategic leadership tools is probably a good start. And then we'll move into the board meeting agenda development, because I think those go hand in hand. So let's take a look at those protocols.
Thank you.
Yep, page 12 of 27. Yep.
For purposes of the public as well, it may be a good idea to read it. Oh, you have the screen share, okay, okay. I still do think that it's of value to read it. So would somebody like to read the rationale for us in terms of using board meetings as strategic leadership tools? Again, this is where you do your business. So who's game to read us the rationale? John?
Yeah. Governance is a strategic function. The primary responsibility of any governing board is setting direction by adopting strategic goals to achieve the organization's vision and mission. The El Dorado County Board of Supervisors is committed to exercising professional and purposeful leadership in ensuring achievement of El Dorado County's long-term goals and objectives.
Great, thank you. So the protocol, who wants to read us the protocol?
I will. The Board of Supervisors will commit time and energy in board meetings to conduct ongoing strategic discussions regarding implementation and impact of county's efforts and programs to accomplish board-adopted strategic goals. The board will commit to developing a deep understanding of major policy issues and address issues with professionalism and respect. Board agendas will be organized around the county's priorities and strategic goals. Administrative or county business will be presented whenever possible with discussion of potential impact on strategic goals and/or county priorities. Department reports to the board will be presented where appropriate with reference to county strategic goals and priorities.
Great, thank you, Wendy. So the other protocol that I put up is on page 19, just to have it sit side by side with you. And page 19 is board meeting agenda development. But before we take a look at that, I want to just check in with you to see if the protocol basically says strategic discussions organized around county priorities and strategic goals, always talking about potential impact. And again, recognizing that the last while has had an emergency component to it. So, you know, so it's, the question I have of you is, are you doing this? Is this protocol how you're operating?
I think it is. I think
Ooh, what we at?
where we're having issues, not an issue, but it's making sure we're defining it as we're talking about it. To remind each other. I don't know, I don't on the agenda when we do the agenda. And that's really good, because that points, this is why we are having this discussion.
Right.
Here's our strategic plan.
Good.
And it's a good reminder for us each to continually
Right.
get back to that.
And I think the
Right.
third protocol really emphasizes it, because every time we see a board agenda, we're looking at how does it relate to our strategic plan? Is it one element? Is it multiple elements? And I think that maintains that focus. So I think that's a really good reflection type of protocol that keeps us centered on what is it we're looking at here. And it's strategic first, and everything else plays out from there.
Okay, good. Don, anything you'd add there?
This is one sorry. Yeah, this is one I feel like I need to do better at. I think the county needs to, I agree and I appreciate the things Sue and John said. But it's in the context of the pandemic, it distracted us from our long-term strategic thinking. I think we do a very good job in connecting the item of the day to the strategic goal or priority, but we just haven't had time to process and think 3, 5, 7 years down the road as a department head team. It's just been difficult because of the environment we've been in. And I'm hoping with things hopefully returning back to some normalcy, we can get back to doing that.
Is there anything, Don, that we should add to this protocol that would clarify that? Or do you think it's stated here and it's just a matter of doing it?
I think it's here. It's just a matter of doing it.
Okay. John, as the board chair, would you add anything on this one?
I can't think of anything that isn't embodied by the 3 statements we
Okay.
have there. I think it's pretty all encompassing, but that's just my view of it.
Other supervisors? Lori?
Not this one. I think the one that you said was on page 19.
Yeah.
That was a little
Okay.
later, and I think that's where I'd like to go.
Okay, perfect. George, anything you want to say before I take us to page 19?
Well, I think it's pretty much explanatory, you know, what the procedures of the board is and what we need to do and to follow us a lot of the protocols. So
Okay, good. And I just want to highlight that, I think the last bullet, and also to back you up, Don, department reports to the board will be presented where appropriate with reference to the strategic goals. That's another place that it just keeps being a reminder. So, okay.
I think the only thing that maybe I'd like my fellow board members' thoughts on this. Do we need to have a bullet following some of the conversation we've had today that talks about that we will commit ourselves to acting as a whole? That it's not a, you know, you talked about, you know, transitioning from, you know, politicking or campaigning to governance. Is there something in there that maybe to help remind us of that? Sometimes that's a tricky function. That we're committed to acting as a whole, or recognizing that our authority lies as a body of 5, not as an individual.
Interesting. That was something when I was on the school board, we constantly put in our strategic plan, and we made that statement constantly.
Right.
In everything, because you forget that.
You do. You do.
Davis, do you want to comment on that?
No, I think I think the essence of what you're talking about is an important point. Tell me a little more about your thinking about it. We can take a minute.
Well, just that, getting back to this thought that we are, as a governance board, our authority lies in the 5 of us. It's not a time, a board meeting is not a time to push individual. That doesn't mean we don't have individual thoughts and positions, but to, what's the word? Help me.
So I think that the key in this area, this is an important area. That's why I wanted you to expand on it. Because you're really looking for balance. Everyone is going to be informed by their own personal ideology.
Naturally,
You're not going to leave that behind.
Right.
And no one would want you to.
no.
So the question is, how do you balance that with the understanding that you're providing a perspective, but you're not trying to mandate a position in terms of based on your own personal philosophy. So you fall back on your interpretation along with the other members. What's good for the county? How do I balance that with
Right.
what is really good? So as I think strategically about the county and the impact of our decision, again, from a system perspective, sometimes I have to put my personal philosophy in a little box but I would never do anything as against it, but rather it's just my perspective of it, if that makes sense. So balance is a key to thought for all of the activities as you work together, because as you reach common ground around an issue, remember that story on the legislative story of the conservative and the liberal, for example, ideologically finding common ground. You're not going to get everything, right? That's going to fit that. But that may not be good for the county. I think if you will fall back on what's good for the county, which is why you're here,
Right.
and let that be your modifying. Nobody said this is an easy job. This is a really tough job. I think it's a very complex form of governance. Not only because so much of the county is related to very difficult issues, people issues, social issues, and as well as developmental issues. Balance becomes very important as you think about these moving parts. And it really affects everybody. I mean, everyone has that because everyone has a different philosophy.
Right.
And they have to go, well, let's go with what's good for the county overall. But sometimes it'll be uncomfortable.
But Davis, I think maybe what Wendy is looking at is operate as a unified board as opposed to a uniform board. But then you have to describe what the terms are, because I think that's what you're looking for, is we operate as a unified board. And even though we'll have differences of opinion, it goes back to the discussion you had. We recognize that we all are going to come from a little different place. And once the vote is set, then we have to look at, all right, what does that mean in terms of implementation, and move beyond that, and don't harbor ill feelings because the vote didn't go your way.
Right.
Operate in a uniform, not unified fashion. The word unified might be a help in there, but
And that board meetings, the role of board meetings is to conduct the public business in accordance with our strategic goals, not to further a personal agenda.
Right,
Recognizing that's the role
but
of
you're
board meeting.
informed by your personal agenda.
Oh, absolutely.
And I
Absolutely. That's
think-
an important
and I
part of the
think-
conversation.
I think that's why the governance mindset, I mean, I think that when someone has really fully developed, and you all have governance mindsets, don't misunderstand me, you really do, I can tell. But you take the long view because you're setting the long-term direction, and you think that, I know that not all my colleagues agree with this particular point of view, so I'm going to respect that. I'm going to be informed by it, but I'm not going to let it control me. I'm going to be controlled by what's good for the county, and there'll be opportunities down the road. I'm not going to, you're not giving up anything by working together and people will know that. Your colleagues will say, well, I know where you're coming from, and I appreciate your willing to work with us on this and finding that common ground, which is the system is designed to have citizens who represent different points of view reach a common ground. That's the way democracy works. So that's the basic core of the system. Not to batter somebody but rather you expect that this level of common sense, this level of, reasonableness. It's funny how we can just rely on, is this reasonable or not? Yeah, it makes sense. This will work. May not be the way I would do it personally, but it's the way we're going to do it as a board. Does that make
So
sense?
do we need another bullet in here under protocol?
Yeah.
I think we do. We need another.
Yeah.
I think so.
I could talk for another 20 minutes.
So I've been jotting down notes quickly, Sue, but what came to mind for you in terms of the goal?
I'm just doing the same thing. I have the board will focus on board unity and collaboration in order to work efficiently to reach common ground. It was just something.
simple.
as
So
simple as
that
Yeah.
was so well stated. I'd
Yeah.
like you to text it to me. please.
Well done.
There you go.
Well done.
I was
I
saying
have
it
a
right
lot of
because everyone's.
words On my page.
Yeah.
Does
Okay, I'll send it to you.
that sound good to everybody? I
Yeah,
think that addition.
We
is
need to
really
include
important.
something else. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Text it and then we'll.
Okay. All
work on
right.
it.
Thank you.
you. That's great.
Thank you, Wendy. Great idea.
So this really leads us, I think, naturally into board meeting agenda development.
Mhm.
So Lori, you.
Wow.
Oh,
Okay.
Wow.
Perfect. I thought it was me. That was. So, Lori, I think it's helpful to read the rationale. Are you game to read the rationale?
Oh, rationale, right, okay. Should I try to turn on my microphone? I'm gonna try, be ready.
Yay.
Critical to effective discussion and deliberation is clarification of the agenda placement process, appropriate placement of items on the board, agenda, and sufficient time for gathering information on the issue so that the Board of Supervisors can make informed decisions. The major objective of the agenda process is to allow for open deliberation by the Board of Supervisors on all county matters not to be considered in closed session. It is important for the agenda development process to be conducted in an orderly, effective manner to ensure transparency and meeting effectiveness.
Great. Thank you for reading that. And I think there's a couple of things to highlight, which is appropriate placement of items, sufficient time for gathering information, and so the board can make informed decisions. I mean, those are really, I think, highlighted components of that. Lori, are you game to keep going? You want to read us the protocol? What is it you've
Oh, the
decided?
protocols, sure. The clerk of the Board of Supervisors prepares an agenda for each meeting in collaboration with the board chair, chief administrative officer, and county council. The Board of Supervisors meeting agenda is prepared weekly according to the Board of Supervisors meeting calendar. Do you want me to just do them all?
Sure.
Oh, this will be mine, I'm done. An agenda review meeting is typically held on Mondays, 8 days prior to a regular meeting. The chief administrative officer, board chair, and/or vice chair, the clerk and county council participate in the agenda review meeting. Each supervisor's assistant may attend the agenda review meeting at the discretion of the corresponding supervisor. A draft of each board meeting agenda is discussed at the agenda review meeting. The clerk of the board publishes the final agenda by close of business the Wednesday before a regular meeting, and if necessary, an addendum to that agenda is published by close of business the Friday before the meeting. Board members may submit items to be added to a given agenda at any time, provided the items are submitted in a timely fashion to be compliant with the Brown Act. And then there's an emphasis on 72-hour requirement for agenda publication. Supervisors are encouraged to contact the Chief Administrative Officer's office with any technical or detailed questions regarding the agenda prior to the board meeting to ensure adequate information is available if necessary. Each agenda item shall include a fiscal impact section that identifies the total costs, impact to the general fund, impact to net county costs, and if possible, the funding source or sources that will be used to cover the costs.
Okay, thank you. So I know we added a few things the last time, but I want to check in with you and see, does this give you the guidance you need for your board meetings?
Not enough. I feel like we need a little bit more.
Okay, so if you added a little bit more, Lori, do you have some thoughts about what you want to add?
Yeah, well, honestly, one of these I wanted to add a meeting or two ago, good governance workshop, but we always run out of time and they're always so exhausting that I let it go, and I'm kind of sad I did. I think that there's been a couple times where board members put an agenda item on, and I get it. We have a little more, what's the word? It's more lax how we can put an agenda item on. And I will say I've appreciated I think the caliber of the staff reports have really improved over the last couple of years. And I do think that, John, you've been kind of pushing for that, and it's quite noticeable. It makes the agenda items go really well. And in my mind, there's been a few times where board members have put things on and there will be a sentence or a letter and no explanation. And it's challenging to know what to do with that. And I think that we should at least have some background information on there to say why we're doing it, how it got to be an agenda item. We have those little community grants that we all do. If we're going to do one of those, I would like to see the application always posted. And then probably it should also say a strategic plan on there too, because it's like, if it doesn't support a strategic plan, why are we doing it? So I would just like to see improvement on the staff board items. I mean, we can get away with it, but there's been times where I've actually had to contact an office and ask questions, and it's like, then I'm sure others do too. So
Right. Okay.
we're not,
Davis.
Having clarity in that would be very helpful.
it would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Has the board ever used the first and second reading process for an action item that requires board vote? Have you done that?
Yes.
Have you chosen not to do that?
Well, it's primarily driven by state law if we have to have multiple readings. That's what I'm referring to. Right.
So Davis, we do that for ordinance changes, first and
Right.
second reading. I have a feeling you're suggesting something a little different. Can you clarify what you're suggesting? I think we're getting hung up on the word first and second reading and
Yes.
the legality of
Yeah,
it.
Right.
so in order for there to be sufficient information, a number of boards require anything that requires a board vote. And that's a formal action by the board, be submitted to the board for information, but what they call first reading, which is the board will get it, and then they take action the next board meeting. But it gives time for the information to get out and stuff. I was just curious, because a number of boards do that.
No, so we don't.
We don't do it in
We
that
don't do
context,
that.
no.
Right.
Do everything twice would be really challenging at
But-
times.
I guess I'd like to ask
Well, that
Kim.
gets to Lori's point about getting
Right.
the background information and plenty of time.
We have
It should be there in the first place.
We have a tool that's supposed to provide, that's called Legistar. And that information should be submitted by each individual supervisor if they want to add something with that descriptive narrative and the detailed information, if it's files or whatever. That goes to the clerk of the board. It should be reviewed, in my opinion, before it comes for agenda finalization, to know that there's sufficient content for the public primarily, right? To be able to open it and read it, understand what it's all about. And if there isn't, then it should be challenged that, hey, we need a little bit more detail. Because that's I think what I've seen happen as well, sometimes as board members, but I'm always trying to look at it from the public's perspective, right? Can the public understand this?
Mhm.
And a lot of times, no, it's too complicated. It's tied with, a detailed process description without a reference to where it is, those kinds of things. And I think that's an area for improvement. But it would be incumbent upon each of the board members to make sure if they're going to submit something, and it's not coming from staff, that there's sufficient detail in that Legistar description to answer the obvious questions. What would the public think if they read this? Do they have enough information to say, I understand it and I like it, or I don't like it, or I don't care? That type of thing. So
And any appropriate files are linked.
Yeah,
yes.
and I can add to that, there have been a few times where, let's say RCRC or CSAC, right, has asked us at the last minute, but I think that needs to be in the background to explain it, why it was last minute.
Why is it an
and
urgency,
this-
right?
this
Yes.
Sample letter. So it's really obvious why we're doing it, because then the whole board knows too, because, we don't all get the same correspondence from CSAC and RCRC. So in my mind, that would be a good place to have those explanations, because sometimes things are time sensitive. And then from that, I can launch another thing, but we should finish this one first.
Okay, good. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is that some standardization and clarity about how an agenda item gets put forward, what kinds of things it needs in order to be able to move forward.
Yeah, and I think I want to add on here that first sentence of board members may submit items to be added to a given agenda at any time. That makes me a little nervous because it's exactly what we're talking about is our staff needs time to take a look at it, to see if it's compliant, and county council should be taking a look at it to make sure it's legal. And looking at all those ramifications. So just to say, oh, we can put it on, as long as it meets the Brown Act, it's good. You got some background check, and it's not to stop anything. It's just that we need to make sure they have time, our staff has time to be able to understand what it is we want and where we're going. So, and I don't know how to fix that, but I'm just saying that makes me uncomfortable hearing that way.
Right.
I think the determining factor is which agenda it goes on. We're not ready yet. It's going to have to move to the next calendar agenda or 2 or 3 agendas to allow time. And that's part of what we try to do in agenda review.
So yeah, should this have a review? I mean, any board member may put an agenda item for pending agenda review. I would hope that everything would go through agenda review unless it's an emergency. I mean, that's my gut on that. I don't know.
Yeah, some of the stuff that's addendum obviously doesn't go through the same level of agenda review because it comes in late and we have to take action or decide we're not going to do it for this particular meeting. We're going to defer it.
Yeah.
So there is some real-time decisions, but I'd like to get Kim's input on this because she's mission central in terms of all these things. And I know she prepared an assistance guide book that describes some of the things that would be helpful from the Legistar entries and stuff. And I'm not sure that was distributed, if it's well understood, but I think some of those kinds of things you've already put a lot of time into would be helpful.
Yeah, I did put together a new assistance guide for the new assistants that just came in with their supervisors being elected. And I can share that with the other assistants also. Actually, most of the assistants, current assistants, had a huge role in the development of that guide. I was trying to do lessons learned from the current assistants to help the new assistants. I'm putting some verbiage up there. I think what might be helpful is if we maybe had board members may submit items to be added to a given agenda prior to that board date's agenda review. I think that's where we've kind of gotten hung up on where an item will be submitted after agenda review and then it catches everybody off guard. I think if we had that verbiage, and of course, there's going to be exceptions to the rule, something maybe happen, but then maybe if it's an extenuating circumstance, when we see that item, I'll take the necessary step to make sure that I email the verbiage to board members so that everybody is in the loop with it. That's just a suggestion.
I'll go back to that. So that first sentence, board members may submit items to be added to a given agenda.
Maybe we should take out the at any time, because that is
Yeah, that makes me
throwing,
nervous.
it's throwing everything off. It makes it sound like, and I
throw it in
think
there.
there's a perception actually from talking to some staff that we can do it whatever we want. And
Right.
we should have a process too for accountability and to be fair to everyone so they can know what we're up to. I mean,
If we take out the at any time, should we add,
And then
to be
and-
submitted to agenda review or in a timely manner? I don't know.
Well, Kim's adding some language.
Okay. Oh,
right,
okay.
kind of live-ish, so
Right.
follow the cursor. See what
Right,
she's
there we
doing.
go. Okay, I'm good.
When are you going to bring the music in with this? We need to.
That's a chair's role. We're gonna add that to the protocol.
Okay.
So at least what I'm hearing, and Kim, unfortunately, I don't have my distance glasses on, so I can't completely see what you're doing. But I heard a couple of things. I just want to make sure that they're captured. One was the recommendation that the at any time be deleted as part of the process, that it's defined a little bit differently. And that the item is submitted prior to agenda review whenever possible. And that you also added something about making sure that the assistants are trained for one, that training is completed, and you might want to put that in the protocol. And then finally, you talked about sort of some expectations of what comes with that agenda item. Some kind of background connection to the strategic plan.
Yeah, she did put that
fiscal
in.
impact, that just some more language around making sure that those things are clear as well.
Yeah, we don't have fiscal in there, Kim, at the bottom of that paragraph. Member submits an item, it should include background and strategic plan component. Yeah, and fiscal, right.
Right.
Implications,
Impacts.
impacts.
Yeah, impacts is fine.
Okay.
One of the things that I think that, I agree with you on that, but I think we need, especially when it comes to public safety, I think that needs, we can't delay it, especially, agenda item, especially when you're talking about some things that pertain to public safety. So,
Yeah, I think we put in there whenever possible. We'll go through agenda review. Leave it at that. Are you comfortable enough with that?
yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
So Ken, Kim, is it important to include the statement that there is a new assistance guide that will provide advisory information on how to submit agenda items? Do we need to tie that into this somewhere so that somebody that reads through this, a member of the public, would know that we have a document that provides help in terms of how to appropriately do it, keep it effective, keep it streamlined, provide the information? Would that be something that should be added, in your opinion?
I think that's up to the board if they want to. It was really, the new assistance guide was really meant to be an internal document to
Right.
provide guidance. I don't know if I'd want to go as far as to include it in the protocol,
Okay.
just because that wasn't the intention of it.
Don, is there,
I was just suggest if we did want to do that, we may want to consider putting that under the role of
Right,
role of the supervisor's
exactly.
assistant.
Right.
Which-
That's a good idea.
I think that's
Which
what better
emphasizes
fits.
their
Totally agree.
responsibility
That's a
to
good
review
idea.
the guide and know the guide.
Right.
Good, I like that.
I like that better. Yes,
Okay.
thank you for
and are you
that.
comfortable with this? These other changes?
Yes, I am.
Should it say board members should submit items to be added to a given agenda prior to agenda review whenever possible? It says may, whenever, I don't know, should.
Yeah, that
That's the
sounds-
preference.
Yeah, that is the preference, but whenever
Yep.
possible.
Items. Now, then we have emphasis on the 72-hour requirement for agenda publication. That doesn't quite relate to that sentence, so you might need to do a little wordsmithing on that. Do we want to say that when that's not possible, that you need to meet the 72-hour requirement?
Right, yeah, put a period after whenever possible, and then the item should be submitted in a timely fashion. We can,
Quite frankly, I think that the language there is somewhat redundant, given that it
Yeah.
otherwise requires compliance with the Brown Act.
Okay, great.
Okay,
So
great.
I'd be fine to
It is,
strike that.
but members of the public might not know what the Brown Act contains relative to this. That's the part I get hung up with.
it's more
I'd
internal.
understood there'd
protocol,
be
though.
some concern about board members being mindful of their own
Hmm.
protocol, so I'm going to trust that you are mindful of the Brown Act requirements.
Okay.
Okay,
Good. Kim, who are you? Are you asking David or who are you
I
asking?
was asking the board members if they're comfortable with the revision, with how that paragraph reads now.
Oh,
The second sentence isn't a complete sentence. Let's see. board members should submit
Take out provided. and put
Yeah,
the
I can take
items
off of provided. that's
Or-
all.
just say the items are submitted. Yep, that's right.
should be or
The
shall be
Yeah,
submitted in a timely fashion, compliant with the Brown Act,
they'll be
items.
yours.
Items,
although it's still.
items must be submitted in a timely fashion to be compliant with the Brown Act.
Must or shall, either way.
Shall, yeah,
You got should
shall
be.
be, maybe shall's a little softer.
Shall, from a requirement standpoint, it's the highest level as opposed to should or whatever.
Yeah, it's
Must
true.
or whatever. Yeah.
okay, so I'm going to ask another question. Does this protocol support you having efficient and effective meetings? Is there anything, and what I mean by that is that, is there anything that you also want to add when agenda items are being added, that they're evaluated? And again, I'm not trying to create a burdensome protocol, but trying to pay attention to and be mindful of length of meetings for you and for the public. So is there
Right.
anything we want to consider in that?
I think these are good changes.
I think some of those gets into the chair's responsibilities. I got a couple of ideas there that may help the meetings
Okay.
be more effective based upon what we've experienced, but I think that's really in the chair definition.
Okay, perfect, John. So if we're okay, we're going to move on then?
I'm just concerned though, if we don't craft a good agenda, it doesn't matter what the chair does.
That's true.
And that-
Absolutely.
It happened a couple times where we knew we had a full agenda and
Mhm.
yet people were allowed to add things to it. And that didn't help our day go any better. So.
Well, let's get into
how
the
do we
question of,
make
yeah,
it- How do we navigate that?
acceptance of addenda items, because we don't have
Ooh,
agenda review on that. What's, because I guess I don't know the criteria. Typically, it's going to be urgency. This is something that came in late. We've got to take action on it because somebody's asking for a letter of input or whatever it is, because there's a decision date. Is that the only criteria where we would consider addendums, or is it also, oh, I forgot to add some things, so we'll put it in as an addenda item? And it could have been carried over maybe to another meeting, because I really don't know that part of the process.
So I will tell you for items coming from departments, we no longer allow it just because, oh, we forgot or, oh, we weren't ready.
Okay.
Now, if it's we forgot and we need it on addenda to avoid a retroactive contract, we will allow that to go.
Yep.
If it's a urgency because something came up in the 3 days prior, or since agenda review, then we will let that go. But in things like that, I try to call the board chair and say, hey, this is coming, any issues?
Right.
So is that written? Do you consider that?
It's not written. It's something that we do with staff. I think the question here is, what about board members bringing
Yeah.
right.
items? I haven't seen very many items on addenda from board members recently. I think the question that I hear the board discussing is, how much authority do you want to allow perhaps the board chair and the CAO or the chair and the vice chair during agenda development to say, you know what, this one came in, Kim keeps that board planning calendar, and our agendas are pretty full, several meetings out. Does the board want to give the authority to the board chair during that agenda development discussion to say, no, you can bring the item, but this week's too full. It wasn't planned out right. We need to delay it to a future meeting.
We do that with department inputs. We
We
don't
do.
necessarily do it with board
And I think,
sponsored initiatives or whatever.
and so from my perspective, I appreciate the conversation about, what the protocol currently says at any time. I took that to say, Supervisor Novus, I'll pick on you for a minute. You would call me, and she hasn't done this, but she would call and say, I want this on the agenda. It was drop everything to get it on because they want it on the agenda. And that's not efficient, because we stopped doing other things, and to try, but that any time phrase caused us to react to that. That makes
Well,
sense?
I think that's a good reason to drop
It was
it.
good to get it out of
Because
So you're concurring, taking out at any time is an
Absolutely.
appropriate
Yeah.
thing, because it really
Yeah.
sets the
Uh-huh.
dynamics of what has to happen. It's got to be submitted in a timely fashion, et cetera.
Right.
It's not just
Yeah.
shove it in the last minute.
It messes up the system.
So again, it just goes back to, if there's urgency items, that there's always room for addendums there. But how much leeway should we have that written in there, or is that just going to be a unwritten protocol?
Well, I'm concerned because the reality in my mind is the sense of urgency is a relative term. If something's time sensitive, of course, but just because somebody says it's urgent and needs to go on an agenda doesn't mean it does. And that's where, we want to make our agendas manageable. So how do we navigate? I still don't see how we can navigate that.
Do we give the discretion to the chair, vice chair to make that call?
I think you have to. I
Yeah,
think that's
I
the
think
only
that
way
makes
you can do
sense.
it. I think you have to during the agenda review.
We could add a protocol statement that,
Yep.
that talks to just the
Just
addendum
the
type of
urgency.
items, right? That
Okay.
come in relative to
Right.
a given board member saying this is urgent, that the chair and vice chair would be included in determining
Whether
Well,
it's
I'm-
time
is or no, it
sensitive.
isn't.
I'm going to suggest, Supervisor Heidel, that this goes beyond just items on addendum. This is during the agenda review for the
Yes.
Wednesday agenda.
Okay.
If it comes in too late and the day is just too full because you have noticed hearings and, a consultant coming, and this would take 5 hours of the day, maybe it needs to wait.
Well, that's why that planning calendar spreadsheet is so important.
It's-
I'm on there all the time. Well, actually, no, I'm on there a lot when I have an item that I want to bring. If I don't have an item that I want to bring, I don't really look at it because I'm hoping everybody else is looking at it when they have items. So I just think that that's a planning tool to make our agendas go well. And everybody needs to get in the habit of looking at that. And if it says right there in red letters on the top, which I appreciate, nobody should be trying to plug anything in there. unless it's time sensitive, which,
One thing I want to say is I just don't think that other board members should restrict another board member to putting something on the agenda. And I think it should be, you know, if he's making a decision to put something on the agenda, if it's a timely fashion, it should be he should be able to do it. But I just don't think it's right for other board members to be able to restrict that particular item. So.
well, I think the restriction we're talking about is not if you're bringing it, it's when.
Right.
To now to make our agendas manageable.
I think
And-
that's an important distinction.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's not that we're going to say you can't bring it. We're
Not
saying.
censoring it.
We're
Yeah,
saying, look, this was already a very full day and your item is not time sensitive, like there's not a date on it or something that has to be done by, we're gonna put it here. I think that's totally reasonable. And I would respect that if I bought an item that wasn't time sensitive, I'd put it, well, I would want to, because I don't really like these horribly congested days, quite honestly.
We don't make the best decisions when we're.
We're not, we
Yeah,
don't, we
really
don't,
burned out.
especially if we go from, honestly, if we go from, one controversial item to
Mhm,
another, if you have 2 or 3 of those big items in one day, it is exhausting, and you're right, I don't think we're at our best form.
No.
So that's
So
another,
Kim has added some draft language that kind of goes after the addendum process submitted after agenda review. It doesn't get to what Dawn was talking about, which is the whole. So is there a better place, in your opinion, Dawn, to add language about, the whole agenda review process and the timeliness of putting items on the agenda when we have already a packed calendar?
Think about that. Departments are required to get their items to my office, I think 2.5 to 3 weeks before the agenda, because that requires a different level of review. I mean, if we want to be pretty restrictive, and if the board's willing to do this, I would suggest it needs to be in Legistar a week before agenda review, because that's when Kim and I often talk and say, we're looking at the 2 meetings down the road saying, how's this day going to look? And there's many times we move items around, and that's usually the 7 to 10 days before the meeting comes up. And if we don't know something's coming, you don't know. You can't make those adjustments. It's too late to make those adjustments. But that does restrict the flexibility of board members. And I think that's the balance you're trying to find.
I think whenever possible is helpful. I don't think we should restrict board members being, having to be 2-3 weeks out. Because there are some things that, come in our communities that we need to take care of.
Right.
But before agenda review, I think is reasonable. It's kind of a balance between the two. And as long as it's on us to make sure that our Legistar item is complete.
So let me just paint this scenario, because this happened a few weeks ago. We had a day where we had a couple noticed hearings that can't be changed. I mean, they can. It costs a lot of money and time
Right.
to change them.
Right.
You had another item where a consultant was coming, and you have to schedule the consultant 3 to 4 weeks out because they're going to be there. And then a controversial item got added I believe it was there during agenda review. But a board member wanted to add it, and per our protocols, that it was allowed to be added, and it created a really long day. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, what tolerance does the board have for those things to create a longer day, because it was too late to plan and make adjustments to the meeting. Does that make sense?
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
How do we capture that in the protocol statement? That's what I'm
Well,
struggling
here,
with.
Kim, I don't know, we're probably working together on this, but what I heard suggested was that always any member of the board can put an item on the agenda. The recommendation is that it would be presented in Legistar with all the Legistar with all the background information 1 week in advance of agenda review. And that during agenda review, you'll make some decisions about when it goes on, not if it goes on, if it isn't time sensitive. I mean, that's what I was hearing. Does that reflect what sounds okay with everybody?
I think it does. We're now referencing a tool, Legistar, and I'm not opposed to that. I'm just saying sometimes tools change. We'd have to modify it if the tool changes, all that stuff. But I think it's the appropriate definition of what has to happen. Because if it's just a piece of paper and it isn't in a Legistart format, it's not gonna work well.
Is that acceptable to everybody?
I like the Friday before.
Friday before agenda review,
Mhm.
that gives us a little more flexibility.
It does.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I scramble and
Yeah.
my personal deadline's always been Friday because I figure that way when the agenda review is being put together on Monday by the clerk's office, they have it. Definitely.
I like
So
that.
That's always seemed to work.
Would you go, would you be willing to consider a statement that said board members will be respectful of the time, how do we say, board members will be respectful of the amount of time it will take and the other agenda items to allow for an efficient meeting to take place?
Yeah.
Or do you want to be here at 7 o'clock at night? And that's your guys' decision.
No, I like that. I like that. It just, once again, helps us think about.
Right, balancing
Yeah.
the agenda items and stuff and having, meetings that have approximately the same duration as opposed to one that gets into 10 hours and another one that's 3 hours. I mean, that's ultimately the goal of any system level view, right? How do you balance workload? How do you make sure that staff has time to respond to things? And I think that gets that core idea.
Supervisor Turnbull, your body language is
Well,
making me question a little bit,
Well,
so.
a little bit frustrating, but anyway, but what if an agenda item was already delayed once prior to that? How do you, how would you, how do you react to that?
Why was it delayed?
It was asked to be delayed.
Was it
Okay,
time
Was asked by
sensitive?
staff or was asked? Huh.
I'm gonna go to the mat on that one.
okay, all right, you can. But that was one of the things that this particular item that, was put on the agenda and that was delayed once. And I wasn't, and it was asked to delay it again, and I decided not to delay it anymore. That's the reason why.
So staff had
Especially
asked
when,
you
right,
to delay it.
well,
Okay.
it was, I ain't gonna say who it was or.
Okay, that's
Okay,
fine.
I just think that's not the issue. The issue is it was already delayed once. And was asked to be delayed and we delayed it and we brought it back up again. And I said, no, I'm not gonna do it. And they wanted to put it out for another 2 weeks. And I said, no.
Was it what you said no because it was time sensitive, or do you feel it was you were being censored?
I felt like I was being censored.
Okay, so somehow we need to clarify the difference
There
between
you go.
something that's time sensitive and something that it's not an if,
Right.
it's a when.
Right.
Right.
But
Okay.
the other part, I want to hear David weigh in on this because we need to make sure that whatever is being proposed is consistent with.
Well, no, we need that.
Best
Yeah, we need that
practices.
trust that it
Yeah.
will
Right,
be
right.
on.
And it may take his office some time to go through and look at specific wording and try to interpret it, because if it's too nebulous, what does it mean when you take action?
That's a really good point, because in my brain, I was thinking about most of the things I put on, honestly, generally speaking, are just like, committee appointments and stuff. And it's like, those aren't usually, mine aren't usually too controversial.
But in case it happens,
But
I
if
mean,
we're-
I think we need to make sure
right.
that perception's not there, that we're
Right.
trying to stop the item from coming on. That
Our role
is
is not to
important.
censor each
But
other.
that's not what
Absolutely.
John's
That's right.
getting at. He's saying that what's being presented, like let's say resolutions or ordinances, I don't think a board member would do, but resolutions, we want to make sure that it's presented correctly, legal, accurate, needs some review, because those are being adopted by the full board. So
Right.
there is a time factor there, a staff time factor. So I think that's more what you were getting at. And that's fair. That's totally fair. We want to make sure that we're doing good legal work. So, did you appreciate those words, David?
Thank you, Lori. Well, what I would say is, obviously, the more lead time that my office has to review an item, the better. And I will also say that thankfully, the circumstances that I think we're talking about right now happen fairly infrequently.
Yes.
As Supervisor Parlin notes, most of these board items are fairly non-controversial. They're appointments and things like that.
Right.
However, there are, of course, times where they are either controversial or legally problematic. And again, in those circumstances, the more time my office has, the better. We nevertheless endeavor to review things as best we can. And if you are going the direction you're heading, where these items would at a bare minimum show up at agenda review, while again, I'd always want more time if you give it to me. That is certainly better than the system we have today. where things can show up as late as addenda or anything like that. And it makes it very difficult to react. And I know that doesn't really serve the board as a whole or the supervisor bringing the item, because many times if there's something that is legally problematic, if given sufficient time, we can work through those issues with the sponsoring supervisor. And so to have, if you are willing to back up that submission again, whenever possible, to at least the agenda review prior, I think that certainly helps.
Agreed. And I think the more proactive we can be as opposed to reactive as board members is really a key to it too. How do you get out in front of this stuff a little bit with enough lead time that all this can come together with some deadline, some suspense date, something that needs to happen? And it's just trying to pick those things are going to be somewhat controversial and get out in front of them a little bit, right? And that's a tough thing to do. But I think the more we as board members can try to exercise that vision, that view, the better off we'll be. So, because everybody's better informed than when we have to make a decision.
And I'll just add one more thing to that, because I think that as generally my experience with this board and prior boards is that supervisors, when they have these items, they seek my office out early on. And so I would just continue to encourage any of you to do that, even if it's not part of this formal process. But if you are encountering an issue that you do think could be problematic, and I even expand it, you should be consulting with the CAO's office if there are, particularly if it involves some policy or some fiscal issues that you think need to be resolved before it can go forward. So early notification is of course better for us in all circumstances.
So anyway, thanks, Don, for having your office open, because it seems like I'm always in your office, So anyway, and thanks, Dave, because there was some clarification and stuff that I needed and stuff, and he was good advice. So I appreciate that.
So Kim's taken out the whole chair, vice chair. Do we want that in there or out of there? Just some discretion, or is everybody looking at the little monitor?
Yeah.
I think we want it in there personally.
I
Yeah.
think I kind
Yeah.
of do too.
Let's try it. We can always take it out,
That's true. And the chair and vice chair rotate, so it's always an adventure.
There's diversity of opinion, right?
Yes.
That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, right?
Let's try it in there.
That's one of the things that I was going to say. First off, really good discussion. Okay, you really dug into this topic, and I think that it's going to have some really positive outcomes. And also the thing about these protocols is, yes, you sign a page every year saying we've reviewed them, we adopt them, but you can change them. So if in fact it's not serving you in the way that you're hoping it will, and efficiency and professionalism and all the details you need to bring items forward, you can change that. So nicely done.
I have one more maybe potential suggestion. When we talk about supervisors are encouraged to contact the chief administrator's officer's office, we want to say as well as county council when appropriate, with any technical or detailed questions. If we're bringing an agenda item forward, is that just a helpful reminder?
I didn't know if that meant like, well, because sometimes if it's a specific department, I'll go to the department head. So I didn't know.
Oh, that's true.
I didn't know if this was trying to say we should go to the CAO and then the CAO directs us to the department, or this one wasn't clear to me.
The context of that paragraph, Supervisor Thomas, is after the agenda has been posted.
Oh,
There's questions. If you read that
Right.
regarding the agenda prior to the board meeting.
Right.
So that's the context. So if there's questions after the agenda is posted,
So
come through the CAO's
I mean, we
office.
put regarding the
But-
posted agenda.
And maybe for clarification, we just put that up front.
Yeah.
After the agenda is posted, supervisors
Oh.
are encouraged, right?
okay.
It's the
That's clear.
sequence of
Okay, I
the
see. I read that
process.
wrong.
Yeah.
Okay,
And then you, Don, might refer us to a department head or whatever from there. Okay, got
okay,
it.
okay, got it.
Yes.
The only question I have there is
I like that.
other items, the reference to other items will be respectful of the amount of time. Is there a better definition of what other items is we can put in? Because I'm trying to reflect that. What is the standard items? What are other items? Is there something more definitive there that we could use?
Do we just want to say for agenda items as a whole? I mean, just for agenda items?
Current agenda items.
Current
That's good.
agenda items.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the best way to express it. Yeah, because it's a little more focused that way.
Got it.
One thing that I wanted to remind you is that they'll, your CAO and office will make the changes to this, and that'll come back to you at a board meeting to adopt them. So you'll
Right.
have a chance to review.
So this isn't
them.
final wordsmithing, but it's the best we can do in a
Right,
this
Exactly.
kind of
yeah.
Thank you,
format.
Donna. I was
Good.
working on
Yeah.
saying that. Yes. So
Right.
are we good for
Yeah.
this one? Shall we?
I am.
You feel better?
Yeah,
okay?
I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's good.
It was a good conversation.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
Good,
that was
very good.
really
stuff.
good.
Yep.
So we're gonna excuse Sue and
Oh, she
Get
leaves?
lunch.
I gotta get out of here.
I'm
Sorry.
home, I think. Yeah.
Bye.
right?
Home?
Yeah.
Good.
Kim?
All right.
After
Is
the
there lunch?
sleepover.
I know. Okay, Monday night, don't, watch what we say.
I know, I thought about you next week.
I
know. So I'm gonna suggest we just take again a 10-minute break. I believe
good.
lunches are here, and then we'll move forward to having a working lunch.
Perfect.
So
And then I
10-minute
get on
break.
Zoom with my.
Hopefully you
Okay,
can
that'll
get
work
home
for
in
you.
time,
Okay,
huh?
yeah.
10 minutes doesn't
On
give you
the-
much
yeah.
time. So.
Zoom from there as much as I can
Yeah.
until I get over the path.
So Kim, was Sue trying to join us in transit, or do we not expect to see her until she gets back home? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, good.
She's on. Okay, great. Thank you, Kim. Before we start again, I'd like to ask you all to look at that one-page oversheet again and look at the list of protocols at the bottom of it. And just make sure you check the ones we have about an hour and 10 minutes left, something like that. And I just want to make sure that we talk about the protocols that you really want to talk about. We may touch them all, but just to be sure. So, John, I know you had one. You want to have me check it? To the role of the chair?
Yeah, and it regards public comment on consent calendar. I think one of the things that I
Wait
could,
a minute. I'm not
Okay.
going to have you do that yet. I
okay,
just want to make sure I get everybody's check.
yes, I've actually got 2 in that category.
Okay, what's the second one?
It deals with the working with staff part of it.
Interactions with county staff?
Yes,
Okay, good. Wendy, how about you? Okay, I'll come back. George, are there any protocols you want to make sure we cover that we haven't on that list? And it's the list in the table of contents in your governance handbook, or also the overview.
Yeah. I think everything I could see I could see anything that really sticks out, like one particular item that sticks out to me, so.
Okay. All right, thank you. Lori, you? We've got 2 for sure. We're going to talk about role of the chair and interaction with county staff.
And then is that different, John, than the public comment and board meetings, or just kind of related?
this deals with just consent is what I wanted to address. So, but I think, the separate one, the separate protocol is public comment and board meeting. So it's separate from the chair's role, because I was addressing it in the chair's role. There may be some things under public comment and board meetings we would want to add. I didn't make any notations there, but
I have something there. I think
Okay.
they're, in my mind, they're related, so.
Okay.
they are related. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have 3 that we want to cover for sure. Wendy, did you have anything you want to add?
Also, briefing on the role of advisory boards.
Okay, great. So we're gonna work, being able to touch on all 4 of these. Everybody okay? So we'll start? Yeah. Okay. Great. So, John, I know you wanted to start with role of the board chair.
Yeah.
We can read it, or I can assume that everybody has read it. It's fairly long, so.
Let's assume everybody's read it.
Sounds
'cause I
good.
think we have a
Yep.
pretty well-informed board. And
Okay, good. So talk about what you see as an area that you want.
Right, so one of the things I'm going to suggest is the board chair can ask anyone who wants to make comment on consent calendar items to identify which consent items they want to address when they start to speak. It's agenda item 13 and agenda item 15 I want to speak to. Some people do that, some people don't. And the difficulty is some people don't recognize it's only about consent calendar. And they start talking about things, and then you're trying to figure out, well, is this something on consent or not? And you come to the conclusion it isn't. You have to stop them. And so maybe just asking them to identify which specific items they want to speak to, as the board does, that we'll get a little bit better understanding. Is it really a consent item or not? If it isn't, they can't quote the agenda item, then it's not a consent item. It should go to open forum for comment. So that was one of the thoughts I
So we
had.
need to add a bullet specific to the public will identify
Right.
specifically the item we're discussing.
Right, that the board chair requests that the public identify during public comment on the consent calendar, which items they would like to address. Item parentheses S, right? Maybe one, maybe multiple.
Okay,
Because I think that also helps us look at the agenda and say, okay, they want to talk about this and this. Well, I'm curious as to what they want to talk about this one. It seems pretty straightforward, but the public will have a different perspective than what board members do. So that was the first one.
okay,
So I'm thinking with that, John, and then I didn't bring a regular agenda out with me, but.
Yeah.
We have on a regular agenda, little notes on each section. sign off, we can leave some words that say, this won't be heard the first time, so people understand it's not gonna be heard tattoo. That's on there because of me. Just so you know, yeah. But I'm just thinking that a good place to put a note on our agendas is like you're saying, that kind of clarification. We always have the consent, adopt agenda and consent items or whatever those words are.
Mhm.
And then put on there, please identify, public or whatever, public comment, put it on the agenda so
Good
that
idea.
people can see it. Because if we just have it in a protocol,
No one's gonna know.
that's not gonna work. Does that make sense?
No, I agree. And we can add that. I think that's the appropriate place to put it. But if it's in the protocol, it's a reminder.
Yeah.
Because what I would see is, as we get to new chairs every year, typically, right? Then we would look and say that the chair would have to read through this again just to refresh. Okay, this is the role I have to step into.
But
And
if it's on the agenda, it'll be there for the whole world.
Agreed.
Every week.
agree. So I like that idea.
Okay.
And I think
Both.
it's both, just a simple statement in a protocol, but we would include it in the agendas that get published so that the public knows ahead of time that
Yeah.
it would be on public comment relative to consent, right? So it'd be right before we get to that approval of the agenda and consent items.
On page 13.
Oh, okay. I think it's a new bullet. So the question is, where does it best fit?
I think it's really frustrating, especially, and I understand where John's coming from, because the reason why when somebody starts speaking and they're talking about something completely different, and then he has to stop them because he doesn't know what they're talking about at first. And then it takes up a lot of time as well.
Right. So we can have a more efficient, meetings. I think maybe after the third bullet, somewhere in there, and there's no ideal location, so it could go in the end as far as that goes, but I'll let staff see if that makes sense.
Comment?
It should, I think they should go on the public comment, board meetings protocols. on it.
Okay,
I
well, maybe
agree.
that's where
I
it
agree.
fits, but to me, it's,
Better.
all right. So let's defer to that.
18.
That's fine.
Mine is
Oh.
20.
Oh, I have my old one in front of me.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's where I was headed. Do you have a language?
Yes.
suggestion?
Let me see if I can't summarize this and make it very efficient. Prior to public comment on the consent calendar, the chair should request that the speaker identify the agenda items, the consent agenda items they choose to speak to or to address, I guess. And obviously you can wordsmith that, but we want to keep it as simple as possible, but get the message across.
Because some of our commenters are very good about that,
Yes, they are.
and it really helps us know what they're talking about.
Right.
Right.
And a lot of, some public comments, they don't know what the appropriate time of the meeting to make a
Uh-huh.
comment, and they'd rather do it early, and if they're in error, so, right.
It's confusing.
I think it will help
And
if
you're
they
saying
can't.
that the chair will verbally remind
Yes,
everybody.
right.
let us
Well,
know
we
which
will put it on the
item.
agenda, and then we will
Okay.
remind everybody, and we may only have to do that for a short period of time,
No,
but,
forever.
Yep.
Because
okay.
We're gonna get new board members, we get new public. I think the more that things are explained on the agenda, it's still helpful for new.
Okay.
people when they come.
All right, I'm good with that. I just hate to be redundant and I feel like you're telling them over and over and over again, but yes, okay.
Anything else you would add in terms of role of the board chair?
Yeah, and this is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Number 6 generally serves as a primary spokesperson for the Board of Supervisors in collaboration with department heads. So underscore it's direct with department heads. And the thing I think we can clarify a little bit is correspondence.
Yes.
Because there's an
I
awful
agree.
lot of correspondence that goes around. And I think if we could say correspondence relative to
Board matters?
board matters or Don, can you help me with this one? Because I'm just trying to say that the board chair shouldn't be the only person dealing with department heads relative to correspondence, because I get a lot of emails all the time about an issue in planning and building or an issue in our DOT and its correspondence, and I'm sending it to them, and I shouldn't be the primary spokesperson for that because each board member has a role there. So it's a clarification thing when we talk about correspondence under that.
Just does correspondence confuse it? What if correspondence was,
I would be happy to take it out of there.
Yeah, I mean-
Because if it's a confusing factor and it's not easily defined, get rid of it, right?
But I also think that, are we trying to say that the board chair is the official spokesperson for the Board of Supervisors in corresponding with other agencies, in terms of board action and things like that? It goes to the board chair speaking on behalf of the board rather than individual supervisors contacting.
Well, the operative term
I don't
to
know.
me is in collaboration with department heads,
Yeah, that,
very specific, right?
I think correspondence should be a separate item, perhaps, so we can clarify. What does primary spokesperson for the board mean?
it was the, excuse me, the intent was to mean when the board took an action, and media calls,
Right.
and anyone calls, they go through the board chair first.
Right.
To speak
There's
on
generally a press
behalf of,
release or something,
to
right?
speak on behalf of the board.
Right.
I think the correspondence here is there's sometimes a department head needs the assistance of a board member to speak on a, well, let's use we haven't done it for a year and a half, but the Community Corrections Partnership graduation ceremonies.
Right.
Oftentimes, the chief probation officer would want someone from the board to speak to that, and that would be, by this protocol, the board chair would be
Yeah.
the first person to call.
Right.
And then if the board chair wasn't there, you go down to the vice chair.
But that's like public events. That's not the correspondence category, right?
Well, that's an example of correspondence with different groups. I think that word correspondence is confusing us because it can be a lot of different things. It can be verbal correspondence, written correspondence.
Right. I would be happy to just take the word correspondence out of there to avoid the confusion, because I think the first two bullets are really the primary things we're trying to address. And then the exceptions is the third one.
That I agree with Supervisor Heidel, but Supervisor Thomas, you have a little hesitation. So what is it you're thinking?
I guess I need clarity. So whenever a board takes action, if there's a follow-up to that action, like we need to send, a letter following that action to other agencies or entities, does that come from the board chair? Or does that come, or do we all just send our letters?
Usually, in fact, I think in almost all circumstances, it's included in the staff report directing the CA, if a department head brings it, a letter, if a board member brings it, directing staff to distribute to legislatures, other government organizations. It kind of goes back to when we write the template for the Legistar items coming
Right.
from board members. There's a section in the staff report that says follow-up actions, and that tells us what and who what to do. And that would address the example you just gave. It would say direct the board chair, direct the CAO or the clerk of the board to distribute this letter to whomever.
So we need to have clarity in our actions and our emotions on that.
I think it comes back to those items in Legistar, which we talked before about filling that whole template.
'Cause I'm just not clear reading this,
Yeah,
how, because individual supervisors, we have autonomy, and yet
Right.
also for official correspondence, it's saying that the board chair is the official spokesperson. So I think we need to tighten that up and just clarify that.
And I'm going to make it a little more complicated. I don't think, Supervisor Thomas, you bring an item
Right?
and the board approves it. I don't think you want to give up your prerogative to speak to that item. And I don't think
No.
to secede that to the chair. No one's suggesting
Definitely
that.
not, no.
So this was really I really believe this was in the context of press releases, media events and public events.
I got follow-up correspondence.
Understood. So
From the board action.
can we take it out of this, remove correspondence from this bullet and have a separate bullet that says, quite frankly, it wouldn't be in the role of the board chair anymore. We'd have
Yeah,
to
it
put
wouldn't
it,
go
we'd
there.
have to put it somewhere else.
Right. I think for clarity, taking it out here is right first step. And then if we feel that it's necessary to add it somewhere else, then that would be appropriate. But correspondence, as you mentioned, is a very broad definition of what we're doing here.
It kind of has the
Can
agenda
I
items
can I ask a
again.
question? It's just confusing to me. So generally serves as primary spokesperson for the Board of Supervisors, period.
Mhm.
Right.
It's confusing to me in collaboration with department heads.
I
but
agree.
It sort of takes it a little bit out of your hands. To me, Don, so I'm just asking the question. Is there a reason to have that statement in there? Wouldn't you be the director of who you work with?
Well, I think a concern a department may have is if the board of supervisor, if a board member wants to put a press release out on something that impacts the department.
Oh,
need
that's
to
true.
talk to the
That's
department.
true. No,
Well, but don't you think it should go through you first, no, Don?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
anything-
fine.
anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it should
That's
go
In
through Don
collaboration with the
first.
CAO?
Sure.
Yeah,
Is that-
CAO, yeah, exactly.
That makes more sense to me.
You okay with that, you guys?
Or designee, because,
Or designate.
yeah, or designee,
just
yeah.
because.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, CAO or designee.
Okay.
The difficult thing with primary spokesperson, when you get beyond press releases, media events and public events is where do you cross over that line?
Yep.
You're taking
Right.
you're taking away the ability of a given board member to represent themselves in some kind of a interchange with staff. And so I prefer to take the word correspondence out of it and to look for another place that we would add that. if
How
that's-
about if we leave correspondence in here, say correspondence following board action or following, because the chair is the ceremonial
So you're saying only when it's,
spokesperson. Official correspondence following board action, or, because I know when I was on the city council, whoever the mayor was, it was a letter from the mayor following action to whatever entity that needed to go.
Yeah, I think this is a separate context.
This is a
Can I ask
separate
also a
context.
clarifying, oh, I'm sorry,
Oh, no.
Go ahead.
clarifying question. The paragraph is a little awkward, it seems to me, in reading it, because it says, after department head, it says, I know we're changing that colon, and then it lists the press release, public events, correspondence, exceptions. Is that informative, or is that necessary language to list? The problem with lists, often when you put it in something like this, is that there's other things that might be listed, and sometimes it does. I'm wondering why the explanation or the clarification is needed, as opposed to just generally serves as primary spokesperson for the Board of Supervisors in collaboration with the CAO.
Yeah.
Just a question.
And then the exceptions are good, district-specific events, areas of
Right, exceptions
expertise,
are-
emergencies.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, I think maybe that, would we want to list those things there and just say, for example, because not having any
Ooh.
examples or anything there. So. So that way we know it's not an
In the
exclusive
construct,
list.
then I think you use language like that with an attorney sitting right there, but because it's a colon, it says the collaboration department heads, it assumes that these are the things that there is collaboration with. That just seems awkward to me from a construct point of view.
so Don, your comments relative to with the CAO versus department heads? Because I thought this was supposed to be more all encompassing and really take the burden of you having to be in the middle of some of this stuff, but maybe I'm reading it wrong.
No, it is. I mean, I think it's worked as written and I think it's, I mean, Supervisor Heidel, if you come to me and say, I'm doing a press release and it's on an issue regarding youth in the detention facility, I'm gonna say, can you call Brian Richard? I'm not gonna have any input on that.
Right.
Once you know the system well enough, that's an easy one, but sometimes a new board member comes in, they don't know where animal services is, so they may call the CAO. I don't have a problem with it being a department head, though. I think they're your subject matter experts. And we haven't had a problem with that. If we started to see a problem with the board member interfacing with the department head, and I don't even know what that problem would be, we could address it separately. I like that first bullet, and Supervisor Thomas, I really appreciate what you're saying, but I think in this context, like the correspondence should come out and find somewhere else to put the communications. Maybe it's in the protocol about communicating with the public and things, because that sounds like really what you're getting at, who to communicate with when you take an action or sponsor an action.
Like,
To
I'm
you be
just
able
not clear on it.
To be able for you to communicate and issue your own correspondence to your constituency.
Well, we can
Yeah.
talk to our own constituents and district specific things, but following a board action is what I'm talking about. So I'm just not clear on
Does
this.
it go under district specific matters? Is that?
Let's circle back
Well,
around. to the
so,
others.
so let me just check and see. And Don, you're making a really good point, that if something's working, why change it, right? So that's part of the point. My question to you is, are we going to say in collaboration with CAO/department heads? I mean, is that?
Well, I think that'd be good, because then if there's a question, where do you go? And what department you go to, at least the
May not
CAO
know.
could give a recommendation.
So just.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
just
I'm
add
okay
it.
with the
Makes
addition.
sense.
Yeah,
CAO and / department heads.
department head,
Right.
yeah.
And
Because
that's
then we
good,
can go
'cause
to him, and then
You do
he
the
can
and
direct me
or,
what
which is the
department head
language
it
we
is,
have in
because
a lot of places.
there's
Maybe
so
that's
many
what it is.
different areas, especially when you're talking about human services, so.
And sometimes it could be you need to talk to a couple department heads on
Right.
that system-wide approach, right?
Okay,
Okay,
so, John, anything else?
that's all I had.
Okay. Anybody else within this role of the board chair?
Sandwich. Let me see if it's actually in here the way that my brain's working. So,
I got something, Lori, if you don't.
yeah, go then if you have it, because I'm
Okay,
trying
well,
to
I
find a
think something
bullet.
needs to be added, because especially if there's two board members that get a little bit out of line, I think the chair should step in and say, hey, look, we're gonna have a 5-minute recess
Hmm.
to stop that. You know what I mean? So we can get focus back on, so it doesn't get way out of proportion, and that one, I don't know. John has that right to be able to do that, especially even in the public issue too. But I think that's one of the things that should be put in there. I mean, that we could have a 10-minute recess or a 5-minute recess. Something that's put in there to be able to, especially if something gets way out of hand between two board members.
Or is it?
I don't know how you feel
or
about
is it
that,
You
but
extend that between a board member and a staff member. I mean,
yeah, I know.
I don't know
But I
what the
don't-
delicate balance is in that, because I hate to stop, just a good exchange of information.
Yeah,
And
but
it's a
when it
judgment
gets,
call where
when
you
it's
do-
almost physical.
Well, when.
Well, you know what I'm saying.
Right, when it gets to almost physical, it's pretty clear, but
Yeah,
it's.
but I think something
where-
needs to be a little bit clarified to be
Having
able, he
something
has
in
a
it
right to do that. So,
that the chair may,
yeah, yeah.
call for that, just giving permission.
Right.
If someone's in a new role as a chair, they might not know they have the authority to do that, and could be a tool in their
So
toolbox.
if leaf is there, that way, when you start reading it, if you are a new chair,
Right.
like Lori's going to become a chair, maybe eventually or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that, or
Good point.
myself or Wendy or whatever, that they could read that, hey, well, that clarifies it a little bit. I can actually do this. So what do you think? Yeah, putting you on the spot.
I think you could put something in that says the board chair may call a recess at any time he or she feels the meeting is becoming disruptive.
Disruptive,
I like that.
unruly, whatever it is, right?
Unreal, yeah.
Right, there you go.
Not
I like
following
that.
decorum,
Right.
whatever,
Right.
whatever the term is. And I like that too. I think it's
Yeah,
a
that's
good
good.
clarification.
Yeah.
Of what the board needs to consider. It's may call, right?
So interestingly, I think at the end of the first paragraph,
Mhm.
it says the chair of the board is charged with preserving order and decorum.
Mhm.
And then maybe add right there.
And may call.
And may call.
And may call for a recess if
That
necessary.
links it with the decorum part.
Right.
which
I
is-
like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think good.
Perfect.
Okay.
Good.
So those two words are the words that I think, order and decorum, to help our chair. Because I know, John, that you tried really hard to, ask folks not to applause during, and we've had that
I was
forever.
demanding they not do that.
Right,
Some
and-
people's interpretation. That's
Well,
not
and-
what the
and-
recording says, but okay.
Right, because exactly interpretation. So if we
Right.
put something in here to define this decorum, and I again think it needs to be on our agenda because it talks about public
Right,
participation, but it will help the chair enforce it if it's on a piece of paper for the public. So I'm not sure if that goes under the chair or the public comment, because like I said, these two are so related, but
Yeah.
one of them I think is with decorum and applause. I remember one time years ago, Shiva, when she was chair, really kind of tried to explain to everyone in the room that it can be very intimidating to others when we're talking these controversial items. That's really what it's about,
Right.
is so that you're not coming across as intimidating others, and we want everyone to feel welcome. So somehow I would like to define that in a way that people can understand why we don't allow it. Because just saying it's our decorum didn't help people understand the reason why. So I kind of defined the decorum, and I don't know where we would put that is the problem. I don't know where that fits in a bullet, so.
So Lori, I'm thinking that it might be helpful for us to sort of put page 20 up so that we're looking at page 20 with page 13, so that we're looking at public comment.
Yeah, they're very related, because in my mind, having these definitions helps the chair. 'Cause
Right.
you can just point to them and say, here it is, this is
Right.
why we're doing
Right.
this, like-
So maybe there's a place in there, if we just pull that one up as well.
Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because it's already there. And
I
yeah.
mean, we already kind of did one because we did the consent calendar one. We added that already.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, that does make sense, because what I try, this is just me trying to figure out how to explain it to somebody. But I put decorum applause. The board wants all members of the public to feel welcome to speak, especially regarding controversial items. Applause or other outbursts are not allowed in the board chambers as a form of intimidation. I mean, that's truly what it is. I don't know if we want to say it like that, but that's the nuts and bolts of it. It's not okay.
If there was a way, and I like what you said, you've made some work.
Yes.
It may need a little softening.
It does.
Your first sentence is
I'm
awesome.
very
I think.
direct.
Yeah.
No,
First
great.
sentence is awesome. Yeah.
But it may be in rationale on public comment.
Okay.
It may
Oh,
be
in the
there,
rationale. Okay.
As this is the rationale for why we do this.
I still
So
like
you
your idea
think
of
the
putting
chair
it.
should specify
the
that
agenda.
first before we go to open forum then?
Um,
Yeah, speak on that. So the chair should speak on that.
Well, I think if John, wanted to do a lead, and particularly if you have clearly a meeting agenda that says there's going to be some
Right.
challenging issues, sure.
Yeah.
But you never know how emotion is going to enter into the discussion and change what you think is
Yeah, I
going to
know.
happen. I mean, that's the part that's hard to
Well,
determine.
That's when we take a recess too, if things are
Right.
getting a
Right.
little
Right.
bit too much.
Yeah, we just take a
Right.
recess.
Recess, let
And I'm
everybody-
fine with the word may, because I think each board member would interpret that differently, right?
Yeah.
I don't like to generally stop public comment on things, because if, First Amendment right, you have a right to say what you want to say. But we need to be careful and thoughtful in terms of how we would respond to not make it an inflammatory type of situation. And that's the tougher part, is not letting your emotion override the logic of bite my tongue, don't say that. Here's what I can say type of thought. So,
Right.
but I think adding it to the rationale here adds value to it. And it does explain why we do some of the things we do, which are listed in the bottom there in terms of if a person providing input to the board creates a disruption, then it covers it. So,
Okay.
I also like putting it under protocols for public comment in the agenda. That way it's in black and white and
Yeah.
folks can read it. And it's easier for the chair to point to it.
Yeah.
There's more gravitas
Yeah,
to
there
it.
you
It's in
go.
black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so the only, I guess, implementation question I have, is this something we think should be on the agenda so the public has the ability to understand why we're doing these things? It's nice to have it in a board
Okay,
manual.
It actually is, if you compare this current protocol, it actually is in our,
Okay,
it's exact word for word. So
Okay.
whatever we put in this protocol will end up in here. So far, we've
All right.
done it that way. So I think it'll be very helpful.
So
to
if we
have.
add the rationale words will be included in then I think we got the right implementation and reminder on a periodic
Right,
basis.
because it's there.
Yeah. So I'm good with that.
Okay. That's what we were talking about, right?
Public comment at 1 minute.
And we'll fix it later. Okay. So it was decorum, applause. The board wants all members of the public to feel welcome to speak, comma, especially regarding controversial items, period. Can you tell I talk to my phone a lot?
Good way to do it.
Yeah. Applause or other outbursts, and I just made up that word. I was trying to figure out the right word, are not allowed in the board chambers as a form of intimidation. And we can fix that, but that's just what,
Yeah, you're telling it like it is, and now we need to work with it a little bit. But that's fine.
Right.
Staff knows how to do that.
I just like to ask for maybe a little bit of latitude to work with Kim on the language to ensure that we.
absolutely, yeah, these
So,
are my
Because we don't
shower
want to
thoughts.
violate the
seriously.
constitutional rights.
Yeah,
so-
I think you guys are wise to note that, striking the appropriate balance between maintaining order and permitting certain First Amendment rights is a very
Absolutely.
difficult thing to do. So I
Yes.
really appreciate that you're being thoughtful about how you
Yes.
engage in this.
Mhm.
And for your benefit, I've had this conversation with some of you in the past. Despite representations to the contrary that have been made during board meetings, a board meeting is not your traditional public forum. It is not viewed in the same way that the courts would view streets, sidewalks, parks, and other public places where the rights to freedom of speech are paramount. And in order to infringe on those, you have to, pass the most strict of scrutiny in order to regulate that. In board meetings, the court would view this as what we call a limited public forum, which means that you are entitled to impose certain regulations so long as they're reasonable and viewpoint neutral. So again, you can't, and Supervisor Parlin's point, she said, applause or other outbursts. I think that's getting at, well, we can't say you can't boo, but you can cheer, right? Obviously, that would be discriminatory against one's viewpoint about the particular conduct. But we can define that type of conduct can be disruptive to the conduct of the public's business during a board meeting. And as such, if it is in fact actually disruptive, that could lead to taking action to either remove the individual from the boardroom, or in the most extreme case, to removing everybody from the boardroom in order to, with the exception of members of the press, and conducting the meeting in that manner. So
Not advised, though.
it is certainly not. Yeah, I think the
So-
conduct would have to be very extreme. And I just do want to make one point, because I think this is where I will, of course, work with Kim on how we craft the language. As you're establishing what amounts to these rules of decorum that could theoretically pose the basis for taking some of these other actions, it's important to note that it's only if there is an actual disruption that you would have the ability to do these things. For example, there's one court case where a gentleman, though it was outside his designated time for public comment, in response to a comment of the board member, he made, I think he made a particular gesture from the audience. That wasn't, although it occurred, it was a form of expression. It occurred outside of his public comment. It didn't actually disrupt the meeting. The meeting's allowed to continue, notwithstanding that. So to try to have that individual removed solely for that conduct would be an infringement upon his First Amendment rights. So again, there is a balance that needs to be stricken there. And so I can make sure that any language that we put in there is mindful of that, and notes not only the potential for that type of conduct to have an intimidating effect on others, but also the high potential for it to create a disruption in the board meeting.
Thank you for that.
So David, the one extension I'd like to ask about is if people bring in visual graphics and stuff, and there's a staff member on it, and it's, accusing the staff members of certain things or whatever, how do we deal with that? They're not commenting to it, but it's being presented to the board. It's very visual.
I think that regulating that type of speech would be very problematic, again, because it doesn't actually disrupt the conduct of the board meeting. Now,
Okay.
if, for example, it was presented in a way where it impeded the cameras or otherwise had some means that it precluded you from conducting your business, then that could be a different story. But the simple fact of it is that because it isn't otherwise disruptive, I think it would be, the board would be hard pressed to regulate that type of expressive activity.
Thank you. That's the way I've kind of interpreted it in the past, but it's always one of those judgment calls, particularly if it's a staff member that's being singled out. I think that's totally inappropriate, but you know, it's not clear what you do with that other than just let it be expressed.
Another thing is what if a certain person is speaking, then another person interrupts that person, trying to speak and get their 3 minutes in? How do you
Yeah.
feel? Is that appropriate, or is that?
Well, I think, yeah, so I think that, that is the type of disruptive behavior, those outbursts that, that could be regulated. And there's a process, your protocols do kind of lay out the steps that the chairman would take in order to first, essentially provide a warning, requesting the person comply with the board's rules of decorum. Because I think that's what to note about that particular situation is, though the objector may say, well, I've got a First Amendment right to whatever expressive conduct that person is engaging in. Well, the person speaking who's being interrupted also has a First Amendment right. And so, as the board, you're kind of guardians of both of those things, and striking that balance is difficult. If it was a repeated conduct, if a particular person was continually interrupting others during their time, again, subject to following your process to admonish that person and request compliance with your rules of decorum, I think that, again, that is the kind of thing that could potentially form the basis for removal from the board chambers.
Who are you going to call?
Get these big marbles.
Okay.
So, I have another one, and I don't know what to do to help, but I feel that when we have speakers who are speaking over their limit or demanding that they get more time than what's in our protocol, what do we do with them? I mean, how do you create a protocol with that? How can we support you as the chair to make that happen? Because my concern is that by just allowing it to happen and not saying anything, it's going to grow. And I feel like we need to somehow address it during the meeting at that time. And I don't know what to do to help with that.
We've talked about cutting the mic off, but I really don't think that's a viable answer.
Why not? It says 3 minutes. Why are we letting someone just do it?
If we had the clock, I'm good with it, but we don't have the clock. So people don't know the time frame that they're into, right?
Can
And
we get a
so-
clock back?
I'm not sure how that would work with the setup.
So we had the clock before,
Right.
but then with the Zoom interface now, and I don't think we go through Granicus.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, the clock did nothing even when we used it. People still talked over.
But if we just say the mic is going to be shut off after 3 minutes, that's our protocol. We can do that, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying, I don't think the clock is the solution. I mean, we've had the clock, I've held up signs that saying time's up or your time's almost over, and people just disregard it.
If people know the mic's going to be shut off at 3 minutes though, and they have an ability to monitor their comments, and that allows them to stage them, in the correct time limit. Without that, that's asking a lot of someone to kind of, know where they're at in 3 minutes. I mean,
Actually, the public would like that. If you're standing in line to talk and somebody's rambling on, you'd
Yeah.
like it to be shut off.
Would.
So, I mean, there's
and
going
it's
to be a certain
applied consistently.
support level for it.
Well, I think if it happens once or twice, start shutting the mics off, I think that person will be more,
Or what I could,
respectful. Let's put it that way.
what I could do is when there's 30 seconds remaining, I could say, make an announcement saying 30 seconds remaining or something to give them a heads up to maybe wrap it up.
I mean, I agree with you, John. If somebody's like finishing their last sentence, at 3 minutes, of course we're, and they're like, I'm almost done. I got my last
But
sentence.
you never can tell if they're the last sentence because typically they're not, even though they're saying they are. So,
Well, okay, so I'm gonna get more specific then.
Yeah.
If someone says, I'm gonna take 5 minutes,
right.
and we say, no, you only get 3,
Mhm.
we should not let them have more than 3. And that's not.
We got to do it consistent with everybody else. If we're
But we
not
do.
letting them have more than 3, nobody else should have more than 3.
Absolutely.
That means we have to cut the mic off.
Well, you can let them finish at 3 minutes. Like if Kim says, 3 minutes, you go, you're at 3, finish your sentence. That's it. But when we have these,
Well, I like that you have 30 seconds left because if you
Yeah.
Yeah,
got something
give
to
them a
say,
heads up.
better say it now and be done, right? So,
but are you understanding? up
yes,
front?
no, I understand what you're saying.
Okay, because by not telling them no, they are walking all over us. And I think it's gonna grow by allowing that to happen. I just do.
I think it's a few isolated cases, but you could be right. Depends on how many controversial things we have
That's my point.
for the board. That's what it amounts to, right?
We
So-
need to be in front of it and consistent. And so that's why I'm asking, is there a protocol that will help you, or what can we do to help with this?
I want, the board to agree on as to how we deal. I suggested we can cut off the mic. Is that something that we should just start administering? We'll warn them at 30 seconds and cut the mic off on everybody at 3 minutes. That's the way you get consistency.
Okay, I just don't feel that by not saying anything back though to correct them, that's gonna be awkward, but if that's how you want to do it, we'll cut it off.
What do you mean?
Well, I think they're
saying-
going to learn very quickly when the mic gets cut off and it's done for everybody the same way.
Okay,
That's it. I better package my message into 3 minutes. And when they say 30 seconds left, you better hit the high points if you haven't gotten there yet, right?
well, just
And
consider.
not read a letter that's going to take 5 minutes or something. That should be
just
submitted to
consider-
clerk.
Consider this then, I'm trying to be helpful.
Yes, no, I understand.
Consider saying, no, Pop, no, you get 3 minutes. So that way they know. There's no 5 minutes anymore, it's gone.
But if
Yeah.
there's no consequences of that,
No, then you cut the mic because you
Okay.
told them.
if
You know,
the
So
board
Let
agrees,
me ask a question. In the protocol right now, it still says, if you're speaking for an organization, you can request 5 minutes. Is that
An
the case?
organization on a hearing. It's very different than just a
Yeah.
regular
on a
agenda
hearing,
item.
not general public comment
Hearing
on a
notice,
agenda
public
item.
hearings.
Yes.
That should be underlined.
Are we
Yes.
on, where are we? Public comment
Okay.
section?
But,
Yeah, we're all over the place.
so, John, are you comfortable? Because it sounds
Well, I'm
like,
comfortable if the board says, yeah, shut the mic off. Otherwise, it becomes one of this judgmental things. I'm almost done. Okay. How long is it going to take you? Some people take another 2 minutes when they're almost done. Some
right,
people make it very terse and they get done.
Well, the thing is, if they're standing in front of us right there, they're gonna, even the mic's shut off, they're gonna still speak. Telling you that right now, it's gonna happen.
It does, it has.
It does.
But does it become part of the official public record then? If the
I
mic is shut
I
off?
can understand if it was Zoom, it would be easier, but when you're having somebody stand in front of you, it's gonna be really hard.
And we can recess the room if we need to, if they
Yeah,
just
okay.
continue to go on some kind of a rant or something. I want to be fair with this, but the judgmental thing, this person's exceeding it, we need to shut them off, and then somebody else is given an opportunity to extend because they didn't quite get their message across or whatever.
Yeah, I
It's
understand.
that what's right and what's wrong.
understand.
If it's consistent, everybody has the same limitation.
Yeah,
It's much easier on the chair to decide where you.
much
pull the plug.
easier if it was on Zoom.
Because-
Well, But
Yeah.
honestly, John, I think you're missing my whole entire
Okay.
point.
Try
When
again,
someone says,
Yep.
I'm gonna take 5 minutes.
Yep. to say no,
Say no.
right,
And you say 3 minutes only.
okay?
Then
And
if you turn off the mic, totally justified.
Yes.
But if you don't explain that when they say I'm taking 5 minutes, then it's kind of vague and not clear what's gonna happen. Do you know what I'm saying?
Isn't that in our agenda package though, in terms of public comment on items? I thought we already had it in
That's
there.
what I'm pointing at.
Okay,
It
So
is.
when
And every-
Someone says it.
And every time I say now taking public comment on, I said individuals will have 3 minutes to address the board.
Right.
I could maybe include in that the statement that individuals will have 3 minutes to address the board. If you exceed your time, the microphone will be turned off.
I like that.
I do too.
But then here I come and I say, I'm gonna take 5 minutes. What are you, the chair, gonna do?
No,
Thank you.
it's really written in the definition that the public knows, the microphone will be turned off in 3 minutes.
There you go. That's a good answer.
I'm good with that answer.
Can you do that?
Yeah. I know.
If the board, I think we have the ability as a board to say, yes, we're gonna do that. We're gonna establish that at least for the time being. Until we, understand how the public's gonna respond. If they continue to talk after the microphone is off, in my opinion, that's not part of the public record.
Okay.
Now, it might be picked up by our video and they might, but it's not part of the official public record. That's the way I would review it. But David might have a better response to that. If they're in the board chamber, is everything they say part of the public record?
It's not recorded, it's not recorded. I guess what I would say is it's perfectly permissible to impose time limits on speakers' time when they're commenting. So despite that some may come to you and say that that's an infringement of their rights, or that by the Constitution, because of whoever they represent, they're entitled to more time. That is false. It is absolutely permissible to impose the time limits. I think to Supervisor Parlin's point, it's important that you do so equally across all speakers. So if you're going to do it, it needs to be done consistently.
Yep.
Again, the risk being that if you're not consistent about it, perhaps you're, again, could be accused of some form of viewpoint discrimination, because you're giving people who are espousing a view you prefer the extra 30 seconds or a minute, whereas the others are getting their mic shut off as soon as the bell rings at 3 minutes.
Right.
So it needs to be done consistently. And that's, so long as you follow those guidelines, I think that your action would be defensible.
Okay, so-
A different type of clock to help out with that or something? I know we can't, you're saying it's not going to be on the monitor, but can we have a physical one or something to help us?
For people here in the board chambers.
Because it'll help the public too.
Yeah.
Stopwatch.
There, obviously, the technology exists. Let Kim and I look at different options for a standalone clock that's easy to control from one of our desks.
So Kim, I didn't see you editing what we have here, but I think we're adding a sentence after the first protocol sentence. Individuals will have 3 minutes to address the board. And then we need to add the statement about the microphone will be cut off after 3 minutes. Or you will be advised 30 seconds prior to the microphone being cut off at 3 minutes. Whatever we want to, however we want to word it, we can wordsmith it, but I think we need to put into this, the protocol, that the microphone will be cut off if that's what we feel strongly about. So that's fine.
And we certainly want to be a place where people feel welcome to speak, and that we don't want to have a overly intimidating process where people don't feel that we want to be approachable, but having this, people do take advantage of it, and applying it consistently will make for an efficient board meeting and allowing everyone to have the opportunity to speak, not just.
So the other thing that happens, they want to read a letter. And it's going to take them 5 minutes to read the letter, right? Because it's a 3-page letter.
Read
So
quick.
This would say you get 3 minutes, and if you don't get the highlights out of your letter, we're just going to shut it off. You'll be muted, and whatever happens beyond that happens.
Can I say something to that effect? I remember reading a letter up here in front of the board one day. And I couldn't get it. I just passed it to the next person. They finished it for me. So anyway, that could be done real easy. So.
Yeah.
You can Really do that.
And in hearings, that's a common practice.
I know.
When you get people in the boardroom for a
Right.
specific hearing, there's a team
Yeah,
effort that goes into
exactly.
making those presentations. And I think that's completely valid, but you do cut the microphone off basically at 3 minutes. So I think we got to change. Kim, you've got it. I think that the wording you have is just fine for now, and we can obviously wordsmith it if we think we need to. But the point is, this is one of our new protocols that we'll inform the public of at every meeting, and I'll make sure that that's made known when a speaker starts, and we'll go from there. Okay.
And there's nothing in the Brown Act that, I should have read it before this, but that specifies the time that we have to allow, right? No, right.
In fact, if you have a large attendance, you can go from 3 minutes to 1 minute.
Actually, Dennis did that incredibly effectively. He could not have gotten through that terrible meeting without
Right.
that. And people did it. And it was so effective. And that was one thing, do we even want to have that in our protocols, the ability on items that are, going to be highly, where we have a lot of public participation. The chairman reserves the right to
I think it's in there.
But there's-
limit
I thought it was
public
already
comment
there.
to 1 minute so that, more people may participate.
I
in
don't
the
think it
meeting.
says 1 minute. It just says may limit public comment, right?
Well, this is another one I want to address because I've never liked it since the day it was put in here because I think it's not worded right. It's the last sentence there, and that it says it is the practice of the board to allocate 20 minutes for public
Yeah.
comment during open forum and for each agenda item.
We don't
Okay,
do that.
practice means you do it often. I don't know if we've ever done it. And this has been my problem with this one since day one. If we're not going to do it on a regular basis, we shouldn't say it's a practice. We could say the board has the discretion to limit comment to 20 minutes. We don't even do that really. So we need to really
I
change
think-
this.
I don't think, I think it should just say the board has the right to allocate 20 minutes to public comment during open forum. The board has the right to limit.
And I think,
Discretion.
I
We
think
don't do it,
the
though.
context is when we
Discretion, say
when we do our
discretion.
planning of how long it's going to take for board items and what do we need to leave, we basically plan for 20 minutes plus some staff response for open forum.
Right.
And I think that's a perfectly legitimate practice, but
But we don't do it.
Let's plan for that. That's what it's really saying.
Well, planning and what we do in practice in the boardroom are completely two different things.
Okay, so do you like the wording that Kim has put in here? The board has the discretion to limit?
Are you ever gonna do it? I'm just curious. Haven't seen it yet.
I
Has
personally-
anyone ever done it?
I personally am not going to do that. Because I don't know how many people are going to stand up and want to comment.
Right, exactly. I
So
agree.
take that out.
Well, I'm just saying, I just want to make sure that we're not setting a false expectation.
Right,
That's all.
I agree.
It's like creating a law. you're
So
never
take the
gonna
whole
enforce.
sentence out? Is that what we want to do?
Do you ever anticipate that we're gonna shorten public comment time on at all? I mean, we always have that discretion, but we definitely want to have it in a protocol for the public to understand. And I'm not sure that 20 minutes, and maybe it's the 20 minutes that is, the board has a discretion to limit public comment, instead of putting a time there, because maybe we want to say an hour,
Well,
on big items. I'm just, to say that it's a practice definitely doesn't work, so.
but one of the things is that one particular agenda item that we had over 100 people here, but there was also 198 people on Zoom that wanted to
Yeah.
speak too, so. I don't know how do you go about that?
This time limit is specific to open forum though. Not
Okay.
different than
open-
an
No, it's
item.
not,
Okay,
Don,
then
and
again.
it says, and for each agenda item to be discussed.
That's true.
At
Oh,
this
you're
time,
right.
it
It
says that.
does say that.
Yep.
My
Maybe you
thought-
just limit it to open forum then, because I thought when we changed this in January. We talked about this a lot in January.
Yeah, I know we
And-
changed it.
And that my recollection, it was the context of open forum because the argument being, if it goes over the 20 minutes, which is the time limit we sent, people can come back the next week and address the board on items not on the consent, not on the
Okay.
agenda.
So I think we take agenda item off of it.
Yeah, we
Even
just
if-
end the
yeah,
sentence
definitely.
during open forum period.
Right, open forum period.
But
there
then we
now.
have to do it.
I'm okay with that.
Okay,
So
you all right?
Well, it says the board has the discretion, right?
Right.
Oh, it says it's the practice of the board to allocate 20 minutes for public comment during open forum.
Yeah,
Okay, oh,
You got to keep up with the
sorry.
editing.
Seems like a show.
It says this, yeah, okay.
So are we saying the board chair? Are we saying the board?
It would be the board chair.
That's what I think it,
Yeah, it
for
should say.
clarification, that's what we need to have in there.
And I don't like the word discretion because one week we're going to limit it to 20 minutes. The other week we're not. We need consistency.
I just think, go to may. The board chair may limit public comment during open forum. Then it's really the discretion of the chair. If that's, because I think ultimately we're all going to deal with it a little bit differently. And in some cases, it may depend upon who the speaker is. Because any given board member may know what a speaker wants to talk to, but the other board members don't have a clue yet, right?
Dave's not gonna like that. We have to have a policy and we have to stick
Right.
to it.
Right.
I understand.
So can't favor anyone. That's bad.
I'm not saying we do favor. I'm just saying, what is,
Just did say that.
does this language meet the may? Does that satisfy what you're trying to get to, Lori? You want shall?
I really don't even know if we need it. I have never seen this board. I think maybe one time in the 10 years I've been coming to board meetings, has there ever been a restriction on comment ever? So that's why I have heartburn with this, because if we're never going to do it, why do we have it in there? That's all.
Each board chair has the discretion to do it. Once you become board chair, if you choose to just limit it to 20 minutes, you have the ability to do that by this protocol. That's what it does, is it allows each chair.
Where
To
20 minutes
define.
come from? It's just a random number, right? What if we wanted to say we want to do an hour? We're only going to spend an hour on public comment.
20 minutes came from that because we thought that was a good time limit, because at the time we were doing open forum at 9 o'clock and we
Oh,
wanted to
right.
get on
Sure.
with the meeting. Since then, we've changed open forum to 1 o'clock.
Maybe it's time to take the 20-minute out.
Okay, and that's what Kim has, so she took it out.
Seems like open forum, when we had it, it's hasn't lasted, very long, so.
I think it's rare
Yeah,
that
that
open
it even
forum
goes
goes
20
beyond
minutes.
more than 20, 25 minutes. It happens
It
sometimes.
does,
Well,
because I've done it.
I know.
It depends on,
When you're doing COVID report outs and stuff, it can take
I-
well over 20 minutes.
Well, and I
right?
think that's what we have to keep some context around this. We've had a unique circumstance the past year
Right.
to 18 months.
Yeah.
How do you manage in a somewhat normal environment?
Okay, so now Kim's current version is just saying we may limit comment during open forum. Is everybody good with that? Do you ever foresee us limiting comment on a regular agenda item? I don't see it happening.
I don't.
no,
We've never done it.
no, not on agenda items,
Okay.
but
No.
I might want to ask the board to consider on something to the effect that on items of intense public interest.
Now you're,
It-
now you're putting qualifiers out there. now,
Well,
So
Individual
who determines
comments.
what intense is?
Well, if we have 150 people in the room and 100 people on Zoom, having the ability to limit individual comments to 1 minute per speaker to allow for as much public participation as possible.
So Supervisor Thomas, the paragraph starts with public comment on certain agenda items designated and approved by the board may be
Okay.
treated differently with specific time limits per
There you go.
speaker.
So it is there.
So that's there.
It could go
That's true.
to
Nope.
30
that's good.
seconds or
That's good.
something if
Thanks
you
for
had
pointing
to,
that
I
out.
guess. but-
Yeah, okay, sounds good.
So the one thing I would like to make sure we do though, just going back, relative to the extension where it says during public hearings only,
Mhm.
comma, individuals authorized by organizations, but I think the only puts an emphasis on, that's the only time 5 minutes would be considered when you're representing an organization at a public hearing. So I think it's a clarity thing, but
I like that.
because some people aren't going to know what a public hearing is, right?
True.
Look at the agenda. It tells you if it's a public hearing or not. So that maybe gets them better focused on what a agendized public hearing is versus a board item.
And I appreciate this conversation because I'm trying to make it so it's very clear on here
Yeah,
to help you as a chair. And then when I do it someday, I can point to these protocols to help me, help the meeting.
I think it helps overall. It's just the board needed to have that discussion because
Yeah.
I like transparency and I like input. And so when you start shutting things off, people go away. You didn't want to hear my comments, did you?
But that's
so
not, yeah.
Anyway.
As someone that's been on the other side of the podium for years, I always timed everything I said. I timed it. I worked on it. It fit in 3 minutes.
So did
I don't
I.
think I ever got cut off.
I had the same
It's
practice.
totally
Yeah.
doable.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so I want
We
to
got
check in because we have time for one more protocol.
How many more did you
only. This
want?
was
Then
a
we need to go
really
to
good
public comment,
discussion.
We've done public comment.
I thought we did public comment.
I thought we had public comment beginning and end. That's what you
We're gonna
have
do
on your
those?
script.
Oh, yes, we will
we
have
did.
public comment. I'm
Right.
sorry. I thought we were talking about public comment at board meetings.
Oh,
So,
no.
Oh.
so,
Oh,
so
right. I've already done that. Okay, got it.
So John, with that,
Yes.
I also want you to take a few minutes to evaluate the workshop. So, and we have a sheet to do that. And
Okay.
we want to have public comments. So shall we just move right over to that then?
Well, is there any burning protocol that somebody has made a specific note of what the language is that they'd like to see changed that we should introduce now? I don't have anything in that
No,
category.
I don't have anything.
No,
I think it's,
good.
I think we did a good job. I
Yeah.
really do.
I
did.
have one really quick unspoken thing that
Go
I
ahead.
just want to speak it, and we don't need to write it down, but in the past, it's been really nice that when there's an item, an agenda item that's district specific, that the board kind of allows that supervisor to make the motion.
I like that.
And it's an unspoken thing.
Right.
But I always thought it was really courteous and I appreciated it. And that way, and if we're all thinking the same way, and then nobody jumps the gun.
I like that.
It's the thing that I appreciated. So I don't think we need to write it down. You guys think we need to write it down?
I think, I don't think so. I think it's just
It's a
respect.
courtesy.
That's what I
That's all
respect.
it
That's
is.
what it is.
Okay, I like that courtesy.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay.
The difficulty is when there's a pause and you're kind of wondering if the board member who represents that district is thinking about rewording something and it just kind of hangs out there for a little bit.
Well, then we'll trigger that
So
supervisor.
that's where the board chair says, we're ready for a motion.
Lori, do you have one?
District 4, whatever, are you ready? And that's, you can do that anytime.
Right, understand. Okay, fair enough. So I don't think that's something we need to capture in a protocol, but appreciate the comment.
Yeah.
Okay,
So with that,
nicely
Babs, I
done.
think back to you.
All right, I'm sending it back to me. Thank you. There, you have a sheet in your packet that basically has 4 quadrants, and I'd like you to just take a look at it and take a couple of minutes. And then I'm going to ask you for any feedback about this workshop. It asks you important things you learned today. This session left me feeling, questions I would still like answered. And based on this session.
I'm looking for the
I want to do
quadrant thing and I
differently.
can't find it. Where
Too
would
much
we look?
paper.
Where would
It
you
should
find it?
be right in the bottom of your packet, but I have lots of them. if anybody needs them. But it's a good reflective tool.
thank you.
So, we'd love to get your feedback and talk about how this went.
Okay, got it. Yep.
And we'll just take maybe 10 minutes at the most, John, for us to be
Hey, Don,
able
so
to
we want your comments.
get
I got it on my
comments.
sheet.
And
so-
then I'm going to give it back to you for public comment. You know, you're reflecting for yourself on this, right? These are important things you learn.
Did we ever get Sue back? I forgot. Did we ever get her?
Kim verified that she had connected during
Oh.
transit, but I suspect she lost connectivity when you go up the hill. At least I do. Depends on
Okay.
your cell coverage, I guess, but.
Right. I was like, wait, we're missing someone.
So with this tool, it's just a chance to, again, personally reflect and then share anything you want to. So I'm not expecting you'll share in every quadrant, but George, how about you first? Do you have any one thing you'd
Yeah,
like to share?
one thing I think we had a good working relationship today. Working good with the board members and stuff and putting in place and actually clarifying a lot of the protocols that we needed to do. I think that was very, very good. Today we had, I think it was a good relationship and getting to know my fellow board members a little bit better.
Really important day. I agree
Yeah, it
with
was
you.
very
Yeah.
good.
There's
Yeah.
Sue.
Oh, hi, Sue.
Yeah.
Oh, you're back home.
Oh, hey, Sue. That's great.
So we are looking at you're muted, Sue. Well, it doesn't look like you're muted, but we can't hear you. Is your microphone on locally?
Oh, was that it? Oh, no.
Still can't hear you. Not sure what's going on. Kim, can you see anything?
Yeah, she is unmuted, but.
Can you hear us,
Volume
Sue?
up, Sue?
She can hear us.
She can hear us.
Huh.
huh?
Well, sometimes the system will choose the wrong speaker or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Or microphone when you
Could be.
go to a. Are you gonna call so we can hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There we go.
Yay.
Enable. Thank you.
I was listening all the way up. You couldn't hear me, but I heard everything, so I'm good. Yeah, yeah,
That's great.
So have you completed your matrix, the 4 quads?
no.
We're asking for a little bit of feedback on the workshop, Sue.
Right,
I'm gonna,
just feedback
I'm
on
gonna
the
jump on
workshop.
that right now. Okay.
Actually, Sue, were you okay with where we landed on our discussion?
Yes, I agreed with everything. It was really a great discussion about public comment and all those other items. And yes, I was very good where we all landed. It's good.
Good.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I would like to share my feeling from the meeting.
Yes.
I'm energized that the Board of Supervisors is discussing sensitive issues and improving collaboration towards our effectiveness and efficiencies. Because I think we made some major strides today in getting to know one another a little bit
Yeah.
better, talking about some of the things that are somewhat sensitive sometimes that we don't want to openly start to address on a one-on-one basis. But when we talk collectively and we find out that, there's opinions out there, but we can reach consensus, so to speak, that, yeah, we can do better here. And we all step up to that goal of doing better, then I think, we've accomplished a lot.
It's really good to hear, John. Thank you.
Well said.
Wendy.
3 words I used were, I'm hopeful following today, energized as well, and deeply encouraged. I share my fellow board members' comments that this has just been such a meaningful day. We needed this. We needed to be in person together. I'm just really grateful for the level of dialogue from, my fellow colleagues. I'm just happy that we've been able to dig into some really meaty issues with respect, with common ground, with the goal of of our county in mind, and how we can best serve our community through us doing a better job in our process. And just really excited to move forward with all of you following today. It's been really meaningful. And thank you so much for your helping us facilitate and get here.
Wonderful. Sorry.
Yes. Well, I think a lot of people have asked me how things have been going with the new board, and I've been very open and honest and said I think it's been a struggle this year. And I don't really think it's so much the new board as the fact that we never
Yep.
got the chance to
Yep.
gel.
Yep.
We are people. I remember, again, Shiva had some really great little things you would say, nuggets. And she's like, we're people, we're not robots.
Yeah.
And we are, we're people. And, once in a while we do crack a joke, can't help it. I think this, and I feel like everybody, as far as I could tell, looked like everybody felt they got heard today with their concerns and the direction we're going. And that was very meaningful. So thank you all very much.
John?
I gave you the energized one and stuff, so I think I've covered it, but I think we need to hear from Sue as a minimum, right?
Did you have a minute
We're
to
go-
do
we're
it,
going
Sue?
there next.
Yeah. I'm looking at the 4 quadrants here. What I learned today or had verified, I think I learned that, we have more in common than we think.
Yeah.
And, it was just nice to have casual conversation even together because we haven't had that and missed that. And was happy to be down there today and be down there Monday and Tuesday. And I'm hoping for more hall time because, that makes a huge difference. And I think that does verify for me that we do have more in common. We do have common ground to be searching for. So because of that, I think the session left me very hopeful. And I don't really have any questions I'd like answered because the conversations where you went, I'd start to have questions. And oh yeah, okay, somebody would answer it. So I mean, what I'd like at our next board meeting is just to continue this energy and good conversation because it's all good. And I really, really appreciate Babs and Davis coming in here and helping us, shine that light on where we need to go as far as common ground. It's huge. And I appreciate everybody's open and conversation. I really value today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Don, you want to weigh in here? George, I have George. Did I have you?
Yeah, you spoke, well, I answered the first question. Today's experience, you want me to talk about that? I think it was great. Very understanding the board's protocols and how to relate to other board members. I think that was very, very good today, what we did. And there was a lot of good information here, which helped me a lot too. And I think it helped. And I have no questions. I have none at all to ask her. And I think based on the next board meeting, I have no questions or what to expect then. So right now. So anyway, that clarifies it all.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Did all supervisors got to weigh in then, yes?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, I'm turning to Don.
I would just echo what everyone said. I'm optimistic. I'm energized. In the conversation you had today, it validated what we started this meeting with. The opening comments you all made is a commitment to our community and wanting to serve our community and be an effective board that serves as best you can. And that was validated with the conversation you had today. So thank you all for participating. And Babs, I can't think, every time you'd call and say, hey, we need to do a check-in and say, I'm too busy. Thank you for pushing us and being prepared for today. It's just thank you. Well done.
Thank you. And I think that maybe I said this to Lori, but my kids live here. So my kids and my grandchildren, and I come up here and volunteer in the kindergarten class at Southern.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I have many, many reasons to be passionate about your work. And it's just been really an honor to be invited to be in this process and just to meet all of you and to see that passion. So thank you. I'm going to pass it on to Davis's last word.
So I just share everything that everyone has said. It's exciting to watch this and to watch you work together and address issues in the manner in which you address them. I see all these governance mindsets and I just love it. You're all doing a great job. I think that what you've demonstrated today is the capacity to be able to not only lead the county, but also to handle anything that you come up against. As long as you stay together, you can handle anything. And that's the excitement of being here, right? It would be boring if you didn't have time.
Yeah.
Right. We need to be bored.
Boring for a little bit.
A little boredom might be
little
might be
bit.
good right now.
But at least we're not falling asleep, right?
Not falling asleep.
So I'd like to open up for public comment. For short public comment, obviously, if anybody on Zoom has any additions they'd like to make before we adjourn,
Do you want me to read my spiel or do you want me just to take the public comment?
just take public comment. I think we're fine with that.
Everybody in the room can speak.
Right. There's nobody in the room, just for
Seeing
the record.
there's nobody in the room, we'll go ahead and take public comment from our Zoom attendees. Now taking public comment from Richard Ross.
I will commend you as a group for participating in this effort. I think anyone who took the time to observe it comes away with a pretty strong confidence that we have some very competent supervisors. You had a common experience upon which to discuss today, so I think you all were able to easily focus. Not so true with other issues that come before you from the county, of course. You represent different groups. You have identified what you thought were different strengths, and consequently, those influence how you think. I think today's effort really goes a long way to overcome some of the handicaps that the Brown Act causes you to have in being able to communicate. And I commend you once again for doing that. I think it's going to be interesting as the county is impacted by the redistricting that's going to happen, how the demographic blending of the several districts will affect how your constituencies view what your individual supervisor position should be. That should be something very interesting in the rest of this 4-year term. So that's all. I will stay within the 3 minutes of public comment that you so.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, thank you.
There's no additional public comment.
All right, very good. So we finished a little bit early. Unless you had any closing statements that either you or Davis would like to make, I think we're adjourned then.
Mr. Chair, can I-
Yes, sorry.
just a reminder to the public, no changes to protocols were approved today.
Right.
They will be coming back to the board in the next 30
Right,
days.
with
or
some
so.
wordsmithing and
Correct.
stuff. So yeah,
Yes,
so
sir.
that nothing is effective today that we've talked about. It's all work in progress to come back. So thank you for the clarification. David, anything you want to contribute? All right, very good. So
Good day.
yep, at this point, we will adjourn the meeting and I've got 1:27. So is that what you got, Kim? 1:26 then, 1:26.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye,
See you
Sam.
Monday.
All right, see you Monday.
Okay.